That's the bottom line. You want a war? You're going to get one.
The cream will rise to the top, oh yeah.
Now you want to get nuts? Come on, let's get nuts.
Hard work pays off. Dreams come true. Bad times don't last, but bad guys do.
Welcome, everybody, to another exciting episode of The Bottom Line. We are happy this week to have with us. Again, we had him on before the NFL season started in college. We brought him back for a little mid-season review. We've got Jeff Barnes from Team NBS back with us today. Hey, Jeff.
I think.
How you doing, Jeff?
I think it's safe to say now, Jeff, we can call you friend of the show.
Friend
Absolutely. You're going to call me that from day one, but I'll take it anytime you want to add that to my titles, by all means.
Right.
Brett's with us somewhere. He got himself a new phone, so he's having some technical issues. So Brett will be with us as soon as he can get that part of it figured out. But why don't we start off? You know, we talked about at the beginning of the year the teams we thought were going to be in it, the players we thought that were going to be making a run at the Heisman. Maybe let's start off first, Jeff, and let's just kind of do a little mid-season review on what's going about the way you know, how you had things planned, maybe team-wise, player-wise. Maybe give us your little synopsis of the college season so far.
Well, I'm actually quite excited. We don't have that one team that everybody swears is the national champion already, right? Everybody's taken a loss for the most part, with the exception of Oregon. Oregon seems to be one of the few teams along with Penn State that haven't lost yet, but I think Penn State's day is coming. But I'm excited about that. A lot of one-loss teams. It would matter a lot more in the 14 playoff, not as much in the 12 team. These teams are all going to make the playoffs, but it adds a lot more mystery, a lot more, muddies the water a little bit, makes it a little more less transparent than what we normally see, where you go, it's either Bama or Georgia. If it's Georgia or nobody else. This year, you have a lot of different feelings about a lot of different opponents. There's no team that's really running away with everything. I think the closest we have right now is Oregon, who just seems to be stepping on everybody now the past few weeks.
Yeah.
So if you – go ahead, Ed.
No, go ahead, Eric.
Well, so if, you know, we kind of did this at the beginning of the year, so let's do this now. Who do you see as – if you were to pick a national champion right now, and we'll talk about this a little bit later as far as the format and everything.
Yeah.
But if you had to put some money down right now, who and why do you believe – what team is going to be the national champion?
Oh, man.
Putting you on the spot.
if I'm going to lean towards anybody right now, I really would lean more towards either Georgia or Texas. And it's not saying anything about Oregon. I think Oregon's a great team, but I think when you get to that playoff, it's going to be a different story when you get to the latter end, the teams they're facing. Right now, they're doing a great job in the Big Ten. They got the big win versus Ohio State. That would be a rematch I would love to see if they meet in the playoff. But I think that's going to wear down a lot of teams that would normally have a lot of time off with the way this playoff is going to shake out, this 12-team playoff. So I think when it comes down to it, though, Georgia is one of those teams that rarely loses twice. And I think they're starting to understand how to play now. Like we saw early in the season, they were kind of just muddling along. Had a tough loss to Bama after they were getting blown out in the first half, came all the way back, took a lead, and then lost in the waning seconds, but then found a way to come out and beat up on Texas, who was blowing away everybody. Right. So I think we're starting to see some of those teams have their one loss, get that out of the system. They start getting it going again. If I'm going to put my bets on teams that are going to make that strong run later on, I believe it's one of those two teams.
Do you think that it's an anomaly at this point in the season that, as much as the SEC is touted, of having the best teams in the country, that as we sit here today, that 3 of the 4 top teams in the AP poll are Big Ten?
I thought the Big Ten,
that's not fitting too well.
I always thought the Big Ten was a more competitive conference. And it's because when you looked at the Big Ten traditionally before the additions of this year, you had Penn State, you had Ohio State, you had Michigan, you had Iowa, you had Wisconsin, right? So those were all really good programs that competed with almost anybody. When you saw the SEC, it was always LSU, Bama, or Georgia, or Florida on their good years, and when one of those teams was down, it was usually 3 teams at the top of the SEC and everybody else. Nobody else was competitive in the SEC compared to those top 3. So it was a little more top heavy than a lot of people get. Now, those 3 teams were world beaters. Don't get me wrong, but they always would beat up on everybody, and then they got to the top 3 teams in that conference, and it was a different story. You would have teams like Florida and South Carolina and those teams in that conference who were pretty decent at times or pretty good, but they would not. It was either LSU was up there and Florida was down, or Florida is up and LSU's down, but they were never all good at the same time. You didn't get that with the Big Ten. The Big Ten was usually those teams are good. Now Iowa's kind of falling behind because they've fallen behind as far as football-wise. They're very old school. They're just starting to modernize their offense, but they're still one of the best defensive teams in the nation when you talk about them. But now that you add in those teams, the USCs, the Oregons, all the teams they brought over from the Pac-12 to add in, and you have a rising program in Indiana who's off to an amazing start this year. That's the kind of football the Big Ten's playing. Those teams are beating up on teams outside the conference, and then they're going out and beating up on each other in the conference. Nebraska was whooping up on a lot of people, and then they ran into a monster that was Indiana. So I think what we're starting to see are teams in the Big Ten are starting to show that, yes, even if we're not considered the elite of this conference, we're still darn good and better than most of those other conferences.
Jeff, who would you say is your surprise college team of the year so far?
Oh, definitely Indiana. Indiana, I thought, was a rising program, but I did not think they would start out 7-0. There was no way I thought Indiana was starting out 7-0, and with the way they were beating people, I'm still in shock the way they just embarrassed Nebraska. Nebraska, we talked about all year how tough this program was, how good they've gotten, and they made Nebraska look like Nebraska before Matt Rule got there.
Yeah,
and it was just a thorough beating, and it established Indiana to say, hey, we're a really good program now. We're not just a basketball school anymore. Our program is coming back up on the football side, and we're going to be very competitive in the Big Ten, I think, for several years to come. They've done a great job of recruiting. This this program has gotten better. They're playing great football. I think one of the things that they're going to continue to do is continue to bring in recruits, continue to attract some of the top talent from schools that they're going to get out of the portal. I think that's one of the main things that's going to keep them successful for a while. Now, whether they can win the Big Ten, I don't know. I don't think they're on Ohio State's level yet, but they're getting very close. They gave Ohio State fits the past 2 years when they faced them. So they're a team that's not going away. They're going to be competing for the Big Ten for years to come, I think.
So as an NFL scout, Jeff, when you see in Indiana where, like you initially said, I thought they were going to be good. I didn't know they were going to be this good. So how does that change your mindset as a scout then when you see Indiana doing the things that they're doing? I mean, it obviously makes you pay more attention. How does that change kind of how you look at it?
I think one of the things that makes you do is look at the program overall and say, let's take a better look at this talent. They have more talent now. Now, it doesn't mean that they're going to have a lot of first-round talent, but you may see guys that, hey, day 3, day 4, day 3, 4, day 2, day 3, you go round 3 or 4 is what I really meant to say. Is you're going to start to see some of those guys that may factor into those situations. We've seen guys get undrafted, make the NFL, and kind of make a name for themselves, like Peyton Hendershot is one of those guys who, comes in as an undrafted free agent, makes the Dallas roster, is making plays in games, and everybody's going, where's the tight end come from? Indiana. He's been around. So they've had talent get in there, whether it's offensive linemen, but they haven't had the studs that go into the NFL and make big names for themselves. And I think they're going to start to get that with the guys that they're coming in.
Do you see that a lot? I'll use another example. Indiana in the Big Ten, you see a BYU and Iowa State, some of the undefeateds that maybe aren't looked at like the Ohio States and stuff. Do you see that sometimes a scout where you see a team in the NCAA and you go, man, that's a phenomenal team. But when you break down the talent, you're like, I don't see anybody on that team that's more than a third or fourth rounder. Does that happen more so than a person would think?
Yeah, well, we saw that when for several years with Cincinnati. We saw guys on that program. Other than Sauce Gardner, you didn't see a lot of first-round guys there, but you saw a lot of guys that were very talented that would come into that league, whether it was second round, third, fourth, even fifth or sixth round, and stick around. That program was great at doing two things: getting a lot of mid-level recruits, 2, 3-star guys, working with them for 2-3 years, making them starters, and those guys would stick with the program. They would get better inside of that program and be very competitive football players. And that was kind of the secret that they had for several years before their coach moved on. So I think when you're looking at a program, that's one of the things you look at is, are they retaining guys that are going to be able to grow in the system, learn how to play at a high level of football and compete? Or are they doing the same thing a lot of other teams are doing, adopting the pro model, using the transfer portal as your free agency, still going into high schools and getting your top 150 prospects, sitting those guys, developing them, while those transfer portal guys help you get better faster. So I think you're seeing a mix of both. Some teams that don't have the collectives to offer a lot of big time money in the portal, just doing exactly that, getting your mid-level recruits, getting a couple of 4-star guys, and they're building their programs long-term that way, trying to retain players. And then you have some that are doing it the other way, using that collective money to go get your transfer portal guys to help you compete faster and still going after your top-level recruits. So it's kind of a big way you look at build the program, look and see what the rosters have, and then that's where you go in and look at the players individually and see who fits what, who has the traits that you like, who performs at a level that you believe when you watch the film that they can translate to the next level.
So as we see the conferences, becoming more and more the power conferences, and not, the sheer number of conferences is being whittled down. As a scout, does that make your process easier? And by easier, I mean there's more common denominators, maybe schedule-wise, or who they play, that you can kind of measure players better when you have a bigger conference where they all play each other, versus hitting the Big 12 and then hitting the Sky and the Mountain and all these different conferences where you really don't get a good gauge of maybe how their top talent pans out against like a Big 10 talent or SEC talent? Or how does it speak a little bit about that?
I think the conference shakeup, it really doesn't change much for us. We're going to go out there and search no matter what. There's weeks where, like last week, I'm at Central Florida watching BYU, UCF, and there's weeks like this week where I'm going to Daytona to see Bethune-Cookman and Grambling State. I'm going to hit every level. I'm going to look for talent no matter what. And when I'm there, I'm there with NFL scouts, talking to them, seeing what they're looking at, seeing what they're seeing. The main thing is, with the conferences changing, I think the one good thing is it allows us not to have to, if you're an area scout, certain guys like that are in my area in the Southeast, you don't get a chance to go out to see Stanford or BYU very often. So the fact that now with the conference realignment and BYU coming into the Big 12 and UCF is in the Big 12, we get to see BYU down here. So that's something we don't get a chance to do. You get those guys on tape, you're looking at their film, maybe seeing some of them in an all-star game, but you don't always get to see them with BYU in person. So you get to go out there and look and say, they list a guy at 6'8". Let me go see if that tackle's really 6'8". You go down there in pregame and realize, yes, he is 6'8". And guess what? The guy on the other side, they say is 6'9", is every bit of 6'9". So next year, I'm looking at a 6'9" tackle as well at BYU. So I think what you're seeing is you're getting a chance to see teams that we traditionally didn't get to see, because if you're in an area and you're not a national scout, you're not going flying around to see all these teams. You're only seeing certain teams that come into your area. And the fact that you can now see teams outside of the area because the conferences have expanded so far is a big blessing in disguise, because now Colorado came down here just a few weeks ago. It's a team I ain't never seen in person. Colorado's a team I always see on film. So there's things like that kind of help us out now with the realignment of conferences that we didn't have to before.
So when you look at teams like that, let's say there's Colorado, or there's, Alabama, or then, in the Big 12 with Iowa State, Iowa in the Big 10. Use Iowa and Iowa State, for example, because we're all familiar with them.
Mm-hmm.
Iowa State has David Montgomery, Breece Hall in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Iowa has Hawkinson, Kittle, Laporta, all those tight ends. So as a scout, are you looking at those programs and you're saying, hey, if I'm looking at running backs, Iowa State's done some good things. I'm looking at tight ends, Iowa's done some good things, or whatever position it might be. Does that also factor into some of the things that you look at, like Campbell's doing something right, or Ferentz is doing something right with tight ends?
Sometimes it's the style of play that kind of helps them breed that kind of player. You look at Notre Dame. Notre Dame's traditionally a running school, so they're always going to have linemen that go out there. They're going to have the big linemen that can help in the running game. Maybe not the greatest pass protectors. Every once in a while, you get a Zach Martin out of there, but for the most part, we've seen a lot of these. We've seen a lot of the tackles come out of Notre Dame, other than like Ryan Stanley. A lot of those other guys didn't exactly pan out as well, because they weren't exactly the greatest pass protectors, but they were better, run blocking. So you look at certain programs and say, well, they produce a lot of these guys, yeah, but the main thing is you don't really want to scout the helmet, because you get into those narratives of, oh, he's an Ohio State quarterback. Well, they never work out at the NFL level. Why do we really want to look at it? No, well, we miss on certain guys because you're looking at the helmet. And that's one of the things you try not to do. And it's kind of the things that works the wrong way for small school guys, right? Oh, what school is that? Oh, it's a small school. Those guys don't play anybody. But you find some really good ball players at that level if you're not scouting the helmet. So the main thing is you do want to look at what those programs do and what they tend to put out. But you also want to make sure when you're looking at the roster, you're not just picking them just because they're, Penn State was known as Penn State as linebacker U. We haven't really seen a lot of great linebackers out of there other than Micah Parsons in the last few years. Jason Kabinda didn't exactly work out a lot of people as well. But you still go over there, you still look at the defensive players that they bring into the league. But for the most part, you do want to make sure you're looking at the player and not really scouting the helmet.
Right. And that can probably be difficult at times, because, us as fans, we're like, well, I'm kind of a closet Lion fan when they're playing somebody else. I can't, it's hard. It's tough for me to be a closet Jets fan, but nonetheless, you still root for those players. You have Alan Lazard in there. You got Breece Hall there. You got Will McDonald on the Jets that are Iowa State players just there. So, So it can, I would think it would be difficult, and that's probably a good way to put it. Is you just can't fall in love with the helmet. You gotta like the player. So
Yeah.
definitely.
Chad, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering, what do you think about Dion and what he's doing in Colorado? So is this leaning that much on the portal? Was that going to last long? Is he going to be able to keep doing that year in and year out? I know he says that he is recruiting high school kids and bringing them in, but I mean, the appearance is it's very heavily transfer portal. Is that sustainable? What do you think?
He's had to, because he's one of those guys who had a program that he virtually gutted when he got there. It wasn't very good when he got there. He had to move on from a lot of guys. If he wanted to get it better faster, he had to use the portal. Because unfortunately, with high school athletes, you're going to have to wait a couple of years to get those guys where you need them to be. He needed to get better faster. That was his promise to the program when he got there. We're going to immediately be better when I get here. So he had to go into the portal and get a lot of guys. Even when he came in last year with a lot of the guys he had, it wasn't good enough, as we saw. Yes, they had a nice start to the season, but as you saw, guys just weren't that good in a lot of positions. As injuries mounted in other positions, you started to see more and more the depth of that team. It wasn't very good. So he had to get marketably better faster. So he had to go into the portal and get a lot of guys. So that's the new thing with the college football. If you have the ability to go into the portal with your collective and get players out the portal, you're going to get better faster. That's your free agency now for college.
Yeah, but do you think he's going to keep doing 50, 60 new kids every year, or do you think that's going to settle down? What do you think?
I think as he gets more and more settled, you won't have to do it as much with the team getting better and better. I think he's got a lot of good classes that he's brought in. They haven't really been big contributors yet because it's the transfer portal guys that are helping them do the most right now. But I think as they get better, as they get to the point where they become a really good program, they're competing, they're going to better bowl games, they're competing for conference titles. That will be the point where you start to see more of the regular traditional recruits shine a little bit more. The guys that stay with the program, those will be the guys that get to stabilize the program and make it where you start to see that kind of come back to the forefront. But he's had to go heavy on the portal to get better faster. It's unfortunate, but it's one of those things that is a guy who still coaches high school. It's hard to tell your high school athletes, to keep your chin up when they're trying to get offers and they're really good ball players. But unfortunately, the portal comes first and recruiting comes second because everybody wants to keep their jobs. So they want to win faster. You got to go get the experienced players that are going to play right now. So that's why it's hard. So it will be sustainable for him, but he's not going to have to hit it as hard in the future when his team is a lot better. So that's the main thing. It will be a little more balanced, I should say, in the future when he gets the team to the level he wants it to be.
Is he gonna make it? Are we gonna call it a future in Colorado, or are we looking at that Florida State job as maybe the next place that Dion goes to? What do you think, Jeff?
I've never, as much as I know of his connection to Florida State, and I don't know if he's going there. And the reason being is Dion is Dion. He's always been Deion Sanders. This is the same guy he was when he played for Florida State. This is always who he's been. He's always been boisterous. He's always been a guy who's going to go out there and say what he wants, do what he wants. And the boosters at Florida State are not exactly used to guys like that, right? They Bobby Bowden could say what he wants because he was God there. Jimbo Fisher couldn't pull that nonsense, as we saw, right? So Jimbo ran out of there before they could get him out of there. Mike Norvell is not the same kind of person. He's a lot more reserved, and he fits more to what they want. For Dion to come in there, Dion's going to say things that are not going to hit them, the way they like it. They're not going to like the things he's going to say. Trust me, there's probably some boosters in Colorado who don't like the things that he's saying, but they're winning, so they're going to shut up and let him do what he does. But we saw how it worked out in Jackson State. He said what he said. He meant what he meant. And it rubbed people the wrong way, including the administration. Now he moved on for a better deal because they weren't going to cut him off because the money brought in. But the fact of the matter was there were a lot of harsh feelings when he left because the fact of the matter was There were people that were rubbed the wrong way when he was there. There were people that were rubbed the wrong way when he left the way he left, and they were going to be upset about it. Florida State is kind of that way. Their boosters are very proud. So they're not going to let Deion come in there and do the stuff that he's doing in Colorado. And if he were to come in there and do it, there would be a lot of friction at some point. So there would be a divorce. So I don't know if it's going to happen. It would be nice. It would be the sexy story. I don't know if it's going to happen because I think he even sees it. It's not worth going back there for him. It's not going to work out the way we wanted to.
Really, even though he's one of their own, he's a Seminole. I mean, he's a big name. He's going to bring in recruits, and you don't think that they could tolerate his flair?
Well,
for lack of, I mean, I like Deion. I think he's a good coach. I think he's done a fantastic job at Colorado, and I just think Florida State with where they're at right now, I don't know that they could turn their noses up at that.
Well,
but
Florida State,
you would have better connections than obviously I do.
Well, Florida State for many years had plenty of opportunity to bring them back to the program. They never did it. And I know a lot of schools where a lot of these guys, they even when they're not coaching there, they're around the program in some shape, form, or fashion. The fact that he was not connected to the school at all is usually a telltale sign. There's a reason why they don't want him around. He's going to say stuff that they're not going to agree with. They don't like to air dirty laundry, so he's going to air it out if he don't like it, and they're not ready for that. They're I don't think it's kind of like Ohio State. They don't bring people around their program that are very boisterous and vocal for a reason because they don't like their dirty laundry out there too. The closest you got was Urban Meyer, and he didn't exactly talk a lot, but he talked when he wanted to. But when Maurice Clarett talked out, you show what happened there, right? So I think what you see is certain programs, they're not going to let just anybody in there, even if it's one of their own, if they feel that it's not the kind of person they want around the program who's going to kind of shed a light on them that they don't want. It'll bring notoriety to the program to have Deion there. It'll definitely be an alumni move, but he's a guy that's going to say what he says, and it's not always going to be what they want to hear, and he's going to say it loud, and they don't want to hear that. So I'm pretty sure that's why you're not going to see him, or even when he's retired, you don't see a Jameis Winston hanging around that program either. Another guy that won him a championship. They just don't do the loud and boisterous guys,
unless they don't win another game.
Unless might change. The closest you're going to get the loud and boisterous with them is Danny Cannell. I mean, So
well, say what you want about Colorado football. When was the last time they've probably going to have two of their players go in the top 10 of the draft coming up next year?
That's a distinct possibility.
So what do you think about Hunter? I mean, how good is the dude? Is he undersized? I mean, do you see more defense, offense? I mean, he obviously isn't going to play.
Yeah, what's his best position?
Yeah.
For me, that's kind of hard. I think he could play on either side of the ball in the NFL. Which one is he going to be an all-pro at? Well, I think he's a solid route runner. I don't think he's a polished route runner. So I don't think he's ready there yet. As a DB, I see a lot of good things from him, but I also see things where there's some pretty decent receivers that kind of get the better of him at times. So I'm looking at him on both sides. It's kind of like how we had that Ted Ginn conversation. Which side of the ball is he? Ended up Ted Ginn was probably a better receiver than he ever was a defender in the NFL. With Travis Hunter, I would probably say getting him the ball would probably be the best option, making him a receiver. You could probably get him to being more of a smaller type of Des Bryant type of receiver.
Kind of a slot, more of a slot.
No, he could be an X or a Z. I think he's big enough to do it, but I think what you're going to see is he's going to be the guy that you're going to get him the ball. He's going to run a specific kind of route tree. You're going to let him use his athleticism to beat people. Not so much where he's going to have this well-polished, well-maintained route tree like, the Garrett Wilsons and the Chris Olaves of the world. Those guys are polished, and he's just not that. He's good, but he isn't polished.
Well, but as you hear the, some scouts, and you talk about the fact that, he's potentially a top 3 in the draft, potentially top 3 as what? Because
that's the question.
You can be a jack of all trades, but if you're not mastering any of them, you're not going to be a top 3 in the draft.
And when you look at him, you don't see Patrick Surtain the second, right? You don't see, you don't see J.C. Horn. You do see certain things from him. So there's things about his game you like on defense. When you see the offensive side of his game, you see a lot of those traits that you like, but you don't see. You see game breaker ability, but you don't see the polished route running. You do see some elite hands, which is something that you really like about him. So there are things about his game. I think he's more suited to the offensive side right now, in my opinion. I think if you're going to make him a receiver, you're going to get a lot out of him. I think you make him a DB, he'll be pretty good, probably high quality. Is he going to be the player that he would have been on an offense? Probably not. I think the offense better suits him. There may be teams that decide to moonlight him a little on one side of the ball or the other if he does go somewhere. But I think overall, you're going to look at him, you're going to refine him to what you want him to be if you're going to take him high, because you want to get the best out of him. I think the higher side of potential for him is going to be offensive more than defensive.
Do you think all this playing offensive defense, do you think that's in the long run that's hurting his draft stock? I mean, is he a top 5 wide receiver? Is he a top 5 pick wide receiver? Is he a top 5 pick defensive back? I mean, is this hurting him? I mean, if he concentrated more on offense, does he have a better chance of being a higher pick?
I think.
What do you think?
I think if you like him as a wide receiver, he's a top 5 pick. I think if you like him as a DB, he's a top 10 pick. I don't know if he's specifically top 5. And it's because I think the defensive side of the ball exposes a little more of his weaknesses than the offensive does. I think the offense is more about, his game being more complete. I think defensively, when he's in man coverage, you see him do a lot of good things, but there are times when even with the most solid wide receiver who's not the athlete that he is, you see certain deficiencies in his game. Whether it was the Stanford game last year where he's locked up backside one-on-one with their receiver and couldn't stop the kid on simple hitches and slants, and then get outworked on the jump ball. So it was like, wow, Travis Hunter, he gets exposed more as a DB than he does a receiver. I think the questions about him on the offensive side of the ball is, can you develop his route tree enough to make him a complete wide receiver? More than just an athlete that makes plays, or the durability aspect. We've seen him have injuries every year where he misses games. That's the bigger questions about his game than anything else. I think the teams that see him will have a plan for him. Do we want him on offense? Do we want him on defense? Is there a guy that we want on defense that we can moonlight on offense? That makes it doable. We've seen that in the past. But I think overall, he's a top 10 pick for sure. Top 5 if he's a receiver.
So top 5 as a receiver. So who are the wide receivers that are contending with him to be the best into the draft, and where does he rank amongst them?
I think, when you talk about the receivers, he's definitely top 3. Luther Burden from Missouri is another one. Excuse me.
There you go, Ed.
All this talking's got me drying up in the throat.
No, you're okay.
McMillan from Arizona is another. So I think when you look at those guys, he's the top receiver out of that group. I don't think that you're going to have anybody else right now that's as high as this guy as he is right now. So I think when it comes to receivers, he's probably your top receiver in this class. Now, when it comes to DB, if I'm looking at DBs, looking as a DB, now with Ben Morrison's injury, I don't know if Ben Morrison comes out this year. I think he probably comes back. Another rehabs comes back next year. He might say, screw it, I don't want to risk an injury next year again, and comes out. But we've seen injuries kind of hinder you during the draft process, that if you can't work out, then teams kind of drop you because of that. So we'll see. But is he a better corner than Will Johnson? I'll take Will Johnson right now. I think overall, I think he's a very good corner. He's definitely a first-round corner, definitely a top 10 corner, but Will Johnson goes ahead of him. So I think when you look at him, which side of the ball you really want him on, receivers, he's probably your top receiver right now. When it comes to DBs, especially corners, there were guys ahead of him.
Makes sense. Toughest position in sports, corner.
So when they talk about the quarterback draft looking pretty light this year, and they talk about the quarterback class not being near what it was for the 24 draft.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any underclassmen quarterbacks that you think may make the jump to the NFL because the lacking quarterback depth in the draft would maybe allow them to go higher than maybe if they continued to stay for another year or two at their college?
I think that there are going to be a couple of guys that try. If it depends on the way that their season goes. I mean, we're seeing the same names that we were talking about last year. So I'm not seeing a ton of underclassmen that are showing enough to make a jump where you say they're first round talents. There's some guys that are playing well that they, you might factor them in there on day 2 or day 3, early day 3, but I don't see enough of those guys to say they're moving up into that, potential first round. Now, granted, a lot of these guys probably won't have first round grades on many draft boards, while they may have a second round grade. Quarterback is always a position that gets pushed up because of the weight of the position. So those guys that will be taking their first round may not have first round grades on them, but they'll be taken because quarterback is just so an important position. If you don't want to wait till round 2 to compete for certain guys. So I think when you look at it, we know that Cam Ward, of course, is the belle of the ball right now, the way Miami's playing. And honestly, when we circle about some other players, we'll be circling back to some of these Miami guys, because seeing them in person, they got a lot of good players on that team. It's not just Cam Ward that's getting it done. But when you look at the quarterback position, there's very few quarterbacks playing better than Cam Ward right now. And Drew Aller's getting all the attention because Penn State's undefeated. He's playing a lot better than he was last year. I wouldn't say he's playing at first-round potential just yet. There's also Shedeur Sanders, everybody loves. I think Shedeur Sanders has a lot of room to still grow. I don't have a first-round grade on him right now. I don't think I'll have one on him by the time he gets to the end of the season. However, he's a guy, if you bring him in with a plan and learn, I think he could potentially be a very good quarterback at the next level. So he's one of those guys that's more on potential than it is as far as his current ability. Because you see the weaknesses when they don't have protection, when he's not able to handle blitzes. There's a lot of breakdowns. He tries to do too much. He makes a lot of crazy mistakes. That's stuff that you got to really coach out of him at the NFL level. So there's a lot with him that you don't look at and say he's more of a project than he is a finished product.
How would you compare him to like Penix or something like that? Is it close? Is he better? Or do you think maybe Penix has a little more
athletic ability? I think he's better than Penix, but I think overall as a quarterback, Penix is miles ahead of him. Penix knew how to manage a game, manage the blitzes, do a lot more things with less talent. He had a lot of good talent around him. I think before he got to Washington, you saw those things from Michael Penix. The problem with Michael Penix is always the injuries. Will he stay healthy enough to go out there and be able to continue to play at a high level? He couldn't do it up until his last 2 years at Washington. And that's kind of what boosted him up aboard big time, because plain and simple, he finally showed you I could be there for double-digit games a season. And we continue to play that way. But I think with Shedeur, you still see some of those crazy mistakes because he tries to do too much, and it's kind of because he has to, right? They don't have the strongest running game.
You got to play some hero ball.
Yeah, the receiving core, if it's not a couple of guys, it's pretty much just guys right now. So he's got to run around, buy time, and do a lot of crazy stuff with an offensive line that's getting better but not great. And he makes some really crazy, weird mistakes, but it's because he's trying to just do too much. I think overall, though, the stuff, because he's doing all that kind of hurts you at the NFL level, because those guys are better athletes. So he's going to have to get coached out of that. He's got to learn, hey, when that blitz is coming, we throw this read quick here. Boom. Here's your audibles. You've got to learn to manage that stuff at the line of scrimmage. Hey, I'm seeing the heavy blitz this side. He's the Mike, swing protection this way. Hey, back. You're either going to go out, or you're going to check release and go this way. So he's got to learn how to do all that stuff, because at Colorado, it's not like that. He's going up to the line. They're clapping. They're looking at the sideline. They're going up. And he's running whatever they're running. And when things break down, that's why he's doing what he's doing. They're running around, buying time, right? NFL, you can't do all that stuff. There's very few guys that get to do that and survive for 15 years.
Yeah, Lamar Jackson. And that's it.
Yeah. Who are the potential quarterbacks that are going to come out in the draft that you have a first round grade on so far? Who do you think?
Hold on, Chad. That's a great segue. We'll just put that up right now. Let's go into Jeff Barnes's top college players that the average Joe watching college football probably has at least heard about. That's a great segue, Chad. Unbelievable.
I do what I can. I do what I can
know,
for
right,
the little
right,
people.
right. It's for the people. It's for the people.
For the little people.
You got Kamala, Trump, and Chad. It's for the people.
For the people.
Well, I don't have any first round grade on a quarterback right now. I have some second round grades on them, but it's not the first time. First round grades are the max I will have on my board are 18 first round grades. Last year I had just over a dozen. So it depends on the class, and 90% of the time you only get 1 or 2 quarterbacks, maybe 3 in a good, really, really deep class that have a first round grade, and then the rest of them are spent on receivers and offensive linemen and pass rushers and corners. And so the first round grades, while those are supposed to be your guys you're projecting to be the top players in the league, they're all pros. All right. So when you talk about second round grades, these are supposed to be Pro Bowl potential players, good starters. These are going to be guys that are going to continue to be high level players. And potential franchise players. So some of these quarterbacks, even though it's a second round grade, they're still potential franchise quarterbacks. So all those quarterbacks I was just talking about, for the most part, are in that second round, low second round grade.
Yours?
Right now, currently. So I think Drew Aller's a high 3 right now for me, which is still a very good grade. That's a starting player. Shador is in the 2s. He's a low 2. I have Cam Ward as a mid 2. So he's one of those guys who's having a great year, but it's a great year. Right? We've seen a lot from Cam Ward over the years where it was like, is he going to be a guy that gets drafted? Is he going to get a mid round, a late round? Now we're talking about potential first day. So it's been a really big year. He's had that kind of Kenny Pickett type year where he was a guy who was muddling around the board somewhere. And then now he's had this astronomical year where he's taken off. So there's a lot of people going to look at Cam Ward a lot differently after this year. So right now he's sitting at the top of my board, but I would say it's still not a first round grade.
So we have a lot of SEC, fans that watch our show too. Where do you see, or maybe you don't, where do you see Milroe, a Beck, where do you see kind of some of the SEC quarterbacks and where they sit on some of the top teams potentially?
Milroe's one of those guys. He's still he's still a project, right? He's still learning how to play the quarterback position traditionally while utilizing his gifts as a runner and an athlete. So teams are going to look at him and say he's probably a kind of a round 3, round 2 kind of grade right now because of the athleticism, because of the upside, because of the ability. But you don't know about him as a passer. So I think there's going to be a lot of negatives when it comes to grading him there. They're going to kind of pull his grade kind of down. When it comes to Carson Beck, there are guys that love him. They're talking about him day one. I know Jim Nagy in the Senior Bowl love him. I am not a big fan of Carson Beck. I have a third round grade on him. And I think this year hasn't done anything to move the needle on that. A lot of people, I watched the spring game. Everybody was raving about it. I didn't see it. I'm not seeing it now. I think this team is very good. I think he does a lot of good things in this system, but he fits. He plays very similar, not as high level as his predecessor, but he plays very similar to him. Where you look at him next level, does it translate? I don't think it translates to a high level player. He's probably gonna be a guy that'll get picked up in the draft at some point. He's going to be in the same situation as predecessors and back up, making a roster, trying to hang on and learn and potentially try and get a chance to compete for a starting job somewhere or just be a long-term backup. But I don't think he's going to be that guy that you're going to bring in as your franchise quarterback. He just hasn't shown enough. Unless you really, really like the traits, I don't see it. I don't see long-term starter in him right now.
Well, if you're, it kind of sounds like going into this next draft, we're going to be lighter than usual for a quarterback. Even wide receivers, I'm not seeing a big laundry list either.
Yeah.
What
You
is
don't have,
your makeup? The top 10, 15 picks in the draft. What kind of position makeup are you looking at?
well, if you're looking for defensive line, we've got that, right? Mason Graham from Michigan is one of the big defensive linemen that's projected to go high. Abdul Carter, Penn State. Once again, we're talking about Big Ten guys. Everybody keeps saying SEC. Big Ten has talent, right? Abdul Carter, we talked about. As far as Nick Scorton, Texas A&M defensive end, guy that's going to kind of more project to that heavy defensive end, kicks inside as a three technique and pass rush situations. He's a guy that moves around defensive fronts and makes plays, but he's a guy that people like a lot. A lot of defensive players. So Deion Walker from Kentucky is another defensive lineman. James Pierce from Tennessee. Everybody loves James Pierce. Another one of these defensive linemen we're talking about, edge rusher. So I think when you're looking at this draft class, the defensive side is going to be the side that gets hit first. Unlike last year where we had that long run on offensive players because it was so everybody was loving the offensive side of the ball in that draft. I think this year it'll be the exact opposite. You're going to see a run on defense. A couple of teams are going to take offense because of need, and then they're going to keep coming back to defense before their board evens out where the offensive players kind of mingle in. I think the heavier part of the offensive players are probably coming that back half of the first than as opposed to this year where they were all in that top 10.
Take care of that fucking dog.
What about offensive linemen? Is that a strong in this possibly in this draft or no?
Yes?
That was my question. That was my question, Jeff. With
Well,
all
you
those
were yelling at
quarterbacks,
the dog, so I thought
I know, but with all those quarterbacks taken last year,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it makes sense that hey, we've got some weaknesses. So I figured offensive lineman would be, you know, I as a Bears fan, offensive lineman has to be like on tops of our list. But you know, that was my thought.
You still got to take the right offensive lineman because that's part of the problem. You haven't been taking the right offensive lineman too many times. But Kelvin Banks is probably one of the best tackles in the nation right now when you talk about offensive linemen. Kelvin Banks, Will Campbell, LSU is another one. Sorry, scrolling through my list here because I have a bunch of guys on here. And then you kind of get a little bit of a fall off, but there's a bunch more.
Where's Banks playing at?
Banks is, I believe, scroll back up. There he is, Texas. He's protecting your two quarterbacks, both Ewers and Manning. All right, so I think when you look at it, it's going to be who's on whose board at the highest and who needs what. Right, because what's going to happen is always a team that's going to take need over value in that first round. If you're an offensive tackle team, needy team, and you know by the time I come back around later in the draft, I'm not going to get the guy that I need right now. Am I going to reach and take him now? Am I going to trade back a couple of spots and get him where I think he should be and risk him not being there? So that's always a game on draft day that teams play, that they got to worry about who's on the board when they want them. Are there enough of those guys that they don't have to take them right now? Or if you really need them, take them now or trade back and get them in a couple of spots where it's safe to trade back to. You don't trade back too far where you miss them, and now you're stuck in the same position you were before. So I think with the tackles, those are your two elite tackles. Then you have a lot of good guys. Like I said, I was just looking at a few of them. I know Miami. It's one of those teams we talk about, Miami. They got some good guys there. One of them was injured when I went to see him, but he's back now. I believe Jalen Rivers, their left tackle, is one of those guys that is going to factor into people's draft boards. So I think there's a lot of good offensive linemen in this draft. I think unlike last year where you saw them go first, second, third, all the way down through round 7, I think there's going to be sweet spots in the draft where you see clusters of them come off the board. There may be a little bit of a dry run before you get into another cluster of them coming off the board again.
All right. I think we need to go to the next. Give us some sleeper player picks, Jeff. Like, the guys like you mentioned, Grambling State. I mean, some of those colleges that the average college player, isn't watching every day unless they're an alumni. Who are some guys that you think, these guys are NFL guys? They're just, they're just not on people's radars.
All right. So I mentioned tackles and BYU, and it's not the small school, no. But nobody's looking at BYU tackles unless you're really watching BYU football. Well, they have one, like I said, 6'8", 320. You look at him, he's not 320 pounds with this big, soggy McDonald's waist. No, you're talking about an athlete. Okay, you're watching all these college offensive linemen with the knee braces on. He doesn't even wear knee braces. Okay, he's long, lean, muscular, athletic. I'm talking about Caleb Etienne. It's a very popular last name now. It's turned around as another Etienne playing somewhere. But Caleb Etienne, left tackle at BYU, is going to be one of those guys. I think that you're going to hear his name as we go through the draft process. You start hearing about him later in the draft. Not day one, but you talk about day 2, day 3, where teams are going to hear that name come off the board and go, wow, we got a tackle? This boy is big, and he's going to be a quality guy. He may take about a year or two to start. He may start right away, but I think overall he's going to be a very good starter for a while. But there are some players at the levels where you want to look at. I'm going to tell you what I saw a couple of guys recently who really stood out to me. One was Cameron Smith of Alabama State. And there's another big offensive lineman, 6'7", 350. Not built like the kid from BYU. He has the McDonald's waist. Here's a guy I can see, most likely what we've seen recently as HBCU players is they're not really getting drafted, but they're getting chased after the minute the draft ends and brought into camp. So he's a guy I think is going to be brought in as an undrafted free agent. He's going to make it into camp somewhere. He's going to work around. He's going to have his ups and downs in camp. Somebody's going to say he's a guard. Stick him at guard, and he's going to stick around and eventually possibly start for somebody after about a year or two of development. And the reason being, he has that big frame. He has a long frame. He's a very powerful person. I watched Alabama State come to Florida with both of their starting quarterback and a number 2 quarterback injured, both out. They played their 3rd string freshman. And how they came in here and won was they ran right behind him. Okay? So when they wanted to control the game, they went right behind him. And I watched him dominate the line of scrimmage for 4 quarters. And when they took him out and they put another tackle in there, it was not the same. When they put him back in there, they owned the line of scrimmage. So he's a guy, like I said, who may not be a tackle at the NFL level. He's probably a guy that's going to kick inside the guard. But he's going to stick around somebody's camp. Who has a plan to work with him, stick and give him a chance to develop. Probably do a little body development, get him a little leaner the way they want him to be, a little more athletic, so he can move around and get those second level blocks. But overall, I think he's a guy that's probably going to stick around and have a nice long career at the next level if he goes to the right camp. So we'll dig around a little more. That's why I keep all my notes.
Notes are handy.
Right. So I'm going to flip back over here. I'm also in the area of South Florida. So South Florida guys have been sticking around the league in different places. One of the guys I think that's going to stick around is Cole Best, their left guard. Once again, guy who's interior player, doesn't get a lot of movement at the point of attack right now. They're a very finesse team when it comes to running the football, but teams love to run zone at the next level. Another guy that's probably going to be brought in after the draft as a rookie free agent. Is going to go into the practice squad, get that development in the locker room with the line, get a little bit stronger, get a little more balance in his technique. I think he's going to be a guy that sticks around and once again makes a roster and sticks around the league. So they also had a linebacker that I liked a lot. Jalen Schuler, sorry. Another linebacker, USF. Okay, so he's another one of those guys that you look at and go, well, USF's program, they don't have a lot of guys. Well, this is a dude. He makes plays. The defense isn't exactly the most overwhelming. You watched, if you watched USF games this year, you've seen them get overwhelmed quite a bit. But one guy that you look at and makes plays, even though they struggle in certain areas of defense when it comes to stopping the run and certain other things, this guy makes plays. He's either forcing fumbles, he's picking off passes. When they're blitzing, he's getting into the backfield and disruptive. So I think he's one of those guys that comes into camp, goes out there, and earns a roster spot at some point. So solid players from schools that are either considered mid-major because they're not in those power fours, or Division I AA FCS guys. And there's a lot more if we go digging through the notes of the guys I've seen so far. But those are just a handful of guys that I've seen with my own eyes this season that I think they're going to end up somewhere in the league.
So I'm going to put you on the spot, because we'll switch to the NFL side here at the top of the hour. But I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
Give me a player in the NFL today that as a scout you said, I freaking told you. I told you. I nailed it. You didn't listen. Like, give me that player where you're just like, I knew that guy was a dog, and
Well, I'll say this. He's not going out there blowing it up on defense right now. Give me a second while I try to remember names. See, this is what happens when I get out of a draft cycle with a kid. I forget names. I remember faces. Okay, so Florida A&M had a safety a couple of years ago named Marquise Bell, guy I stood on a table for when it came to the draft. Willie Simmons was beating the drums for him up and down NFL locker rooms, scouting department rooms, I should say. I saw him, amazing young safety. Went undrafted. Cowboys pick him up. And he kind of was on a practice squad for a year or two, made the active roster last year. And when they got light at linebacker, Marquise Bell was playing linebacker for them last season because they were playing safeties at linebacker. And he was out there playing linebacker for them last year. Now he's back at safety. You still see him out there in sub packages. You still see him out there playing specials. And he's a guy, if you keep seeing more and more games from Donovan Wilson like he had this week where against the 49ers, where he wasn't even in the same zip code as many of the plays, you may be seeing Marquise Bell out there with the starting defense. Marquise Bell has the size. He has the range. He doesn't have the amazing ball skills as far as interceptions, but he's a guy that's you're going to find around the football. Now, as a linebacker, he was too light to be in the box. But yep, he still stepped up, made some plays for you in the running game. Was a little out of sorts at times because playing safety and chasing down runs from 12 yards deep, as opposed to playing it at 4 yards as a linebacker when everything's on you a lot faster, including guards, a little bit different story. So while he has some good things, did some good things and bad things as a linebacker, I think putting him back at safety in his natural element, give him time to come back out there and compete. I think he's going to be a guy that, once again, so far right now, I'm saying everybody has said that he couldn't play in the NFL. He's doing a great job of it, and I would love to see him play it a lot more. So by all means, Donovan Wilson, keep messing up so he can come take your job.
Brett!
Yeah,
So you can hear us now?
I'm good now. I'm out in the work truck. I think this has motivated me to get my office squared away for next week, so I apologize. This is what happens when you're an old redneck and you were one of the last ones to get a cell phone because you never want anybody to get in touch with you, and technology is not my friend.
So before we go to break and come back with our picks, Brett, did you have any burning questions that
we'll give you one question break? We're on a break here, so we gotta give you one question.
In between me dabbling with my phone and everything else, I did hear Jeff mention Georgia. And look, if Alabama, and they're probably not going to be in it this year in the playoffs, my pick, I'm pulling for Oregon. I just don't know if they have the horses on both lines of scrimmage, too. And Georgia, Now with the NIL and the portal, in my opinion, you've got to be an even better salesperson than what you were before as a coach. You've got to be a great motivator. And I'm going to tell you, Kirby was with Nick probably 15 years total with the Dolphins, the LSU Tigers, and with Alabama. And what Kirby pulled off the other week, saying that nobody has given us a chance. Texas is favorite. He had that imprinted in them guys, and they look like the old Georgia or the old Alabama under Nick. And if they come out like that, I don't see anybody beating Georgia. Now their quarterback is he'll throw for 3 or 4 touchdowns, but he's also throwing for a couple picks a game, and that could come back to haunt them. But their defensive front, I mean, I know y'all are gonna get mad at me, but I've got to make a meme with Archie and with Quinn on the sideline because they look like deers in headlights. During that game, they're totally overwhelmed. And that left tackle, which Jeff knows, he's projected to be a first rounder, isn't he?
Yeah.
They got
he's owned. On money people's boards right now.
They got owned on that line of scrimmage. And I'm gonna tell you, that Georgia team's a problem. I'll be rooting for the Ducks, but I don't think they have the guys on both lines of scrimmage to compete with something like that.
Yeah, they're going to be a tough matchup against Georgia. I think you saw them against Ohio State. They seem to match up well versus Ohio State. That's probably the best Ohio State team versus Oregon since the last one that actually beat Oregon. But I think, when you look at it, Oregon's always got speed everywhere on the field. That's something that Ohio State doesn't always have.
Right.
So you always see the difference between those two programs when they play each other. But Georgia seems to have the strength and the speed. And that's one of the things that makes it hard to compete with Georgia is because they have all of that. Texas has all of that.
All right.
And Alabama usually has all that. So when you look at it, that's one of the things you have to look at and say, why are they able to compete with certain teams and not others? I think when you look at Oregon, they can go out there and run circles around on Ohio State, but you're not going to be able to do that against a Georgia. You're not going to be able to do that against a Texas. And you got to be able to hold up against the blunt force trauma that comes along with the speed that those teams have.
Right. Go back and look at the last decade or two when Oregon gets in a big game against an Auburn or, a big, strong physical team. And when it gets 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1, they're not big and strong enough to stop them, and they're not big and strong enough to get that yard that they need when they get inside the 5. That's the big difference to me is what I've seen. Now, Dan Lanning, once again, is a prodigy from Nick Saban, and then he went on with Kirby to Georgia. Dan Lanning's a fantastic coach. Mm-hmm. From what I gather here in Tuscaloosa, he was the first guy we picked up the phone and called, that was the guy I wanted. I think DeBoer might end up being a good coach here. I don't even want to get on that subject.
Whoa.
But Lanning.
Fake news. What Brett
I'm gonna tell you what, man.
Don't listen to him, Jeff. It's fake news. He's lying.
Zero discipline on our team right now. Zero.
Well, I host a college football recap show every Saturday night, and one of the things they were saying a couple of weeks ago was, "Is he a top 10 college football coach?" I said, "Hold your horses. Don't go crowning him yet. He hasn't done anything at this level of football yet." Yes, he got to the playoff last year and then championship game. It was a great run. Now you're at Alabama. You have all the expectations that come along with it. You have the teams that can do it. Can you get it done? You're seeing right now.
And we don't play around here. You can ask Eric after the Tennessee game. One of my friends called me and said, "Where are you headed?" I said, "I'm headed to U-Haul." And they said, "Why?" I said, "I'm going to pack his shit for him." We ain't going back to the Mike Shula and Mike Dubose days, so he needs to figure it out quick.
We got welcome Brett to the show, Jeff. We're welcoming Brett to the show right there.
Well, I'm afraid, guys, we need to get to the pick segment and get through that, or else we're going to have a very abbreviated NFL segment. So I think, Eric, if you want to pull that up.
Yeah, let me get up here too.
Eric and Chad and Ed, Jeff is like, damn, we should have just kept him muted. We should have acted like we couldn't see him or something.
Well, Ed needs to run down. How is everybody doing pick-wise?
No, we don't.
So once again, we got
Ah,
the big dog heading into this week is still Chad.
Oh,
oh,
You know, just so you know, Jeff.
you mean it's not football Jesus, Eric? Yeah.
It's getting closer, though, bud.
Okay. All right.
So-
Now,
Is getting
football, hey,
closer.
football.
You're
Should
football
probably
Jesus,
fill you
so.
in, Jeff. When we do our picks, unless it's a really late week, we don't pick any games that are more than about a 3-point spread.
Okay.
So we don't pick any easy games.
No.
So when I tell you that Chad's 56-36 so far, 20 games over 500, that's pretty impressive. So
It is. It is.
Chad's got a
I'm
one
not
game
football
lead.
Jesus, Eric, but
Guess what, bud? This season's only half over.
I know it. I know it.
Chad's
I'm ready
got
for. I'm ready for it to be over on the picks.
I don't know what you're worried about Eric for. You got to be worried about me. I'm only one
He
behind
knows
you.
you're gonna
You're
fold
not
like a
football
cheap
Jesus.
suit,
He's
baby.
football Jesus.
You're gonna fold like a cheap
He's
suit,
the-
just like the
He's
Vikings.
the greatest. He's the greatest football mind of all time.
You got it, baby. Thanks for that. Thanks for that comment, man. Can I use that in a commercial or something if I'm
You
ever?
can.
I can make a meme and say, come watch the show. I'm going to introduce you to football Jesus.
I'm gonna get shirts printed up
Okay.
to say "Football Jesus." I'm getting them.
I added 2 games this week over what I had planned on just because I wanted to appease our SEC following because we got quite a few SEC fans out there. So I wanted to put a couple more games in there.
Just be honest. Just tell them I threw a fit.
You did.
You did.
Yeah, when I FaceTime Brad, he was on the ground in a fetal position sucking his thumb. So I figured I had to add more games in for the SEC. So
Well, at least it was
First game.
just his thumb this time.
That's true. That's true. Jeff, you ought to see me when I wore a wig one night in a boa.
Oh boy. Oh
Yeah.
boy.
You must have had the inner Ric Flair channeling that night.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
exactly right.
first game, number 19 Ole Miss is 7-point favorites at 6-2, going to Arkansas, who's 5-3. Who
Brett,
wants to go first?
Your game, Brett. Let's do it.
Since I know you guys are going to pick the exact opposite of me, and if I was you, Jeff, I would do the same thing. I'm going with Woo Pig in honor of Russell, my buddy, and some of the other guys. Got an admin that's a Arkansas fan. Keep in mind they beat Tennessee at home. Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin's not known for winning big games on the road. It's only a 7-point line. The only reason we're picking it is because I threw a fit. Give me the Hogs. Woo Pig.
What you
Chad,
got, Jeff?
When I look at this matchup, listen, Arkansas is a tough out. They're not an easy. A couple of years ago, this would have been one you go. It's a 21-point line, but no, they were a tough team. Ole Miss has taken some lumps, and a lot of people were expecting them to be in the hunt for one of the top seeds in the playoff. But I think this Ole Miss really is who they are. They are a 6-2 team. They have some flaws. Arkansas is a little more flawed, so I'm going to go with Ole Miss, even though they are on the road.
Chad?
Give me them Ole Miss Rebels.
Thank you
I'm
for
picking
going
Ole
first.
Miss as well.
Thank you for going first, Brett. I too am going Ole Miss.
I knew I was going to be the only one. I knew.
Arkansas?
As soon as you said Arkansas, I was like, oh God, thank God my Ole Miss pick might be good.
Yeah.
It is good.
Yeah,
Guaranteed.
Jeff, they're not telling you why I'm bad anyways, but I'm picked against Kansas City every week this year because I can't stand them and the favoritism they get from the refs. So I am 0-6, 0-7 against Kansas City.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it on the refs too much. The refs are bad in every game, but after I know you're a huge Minnesota fan. I know you're upset about that face mask.
That's it.
Well, I'm a Bears fan, so I don't even want to talk about my game.
Well, that was a whole nother story. But Minnesota's last 2 losses, though, I must say, it's a little more than just the penalties. But we'll talk about the rest of that later.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that. So we got Jay, Marty, and I believe Debbie all taking the red. Ole Miss. Henry is siding with Brett.
Whoopee,
I feel bad,
baby.
Henry. I feel bad,
Arkansas.
Henry. I'm sorry.
Hey, that's
man.
because he knows I'm pulling for Oregon. He's an Oregon fan.
Well, he's
Okay.
feeling sorry for you.
So the
Next
next
game.
game we got the giant killer, Vanderbilt at 5-3, going to Auburn, who's 3-5, but they got Auburn as 7-point favorites.
Yeah, right. Give me the Commodores, baby. I'm taking Vanderbilt. I've watched Auburn twice. I'm telling you, man.
You should have let me go first. I'm going.
No,
with
you're going to
the
go last
Commodores.
because I'm going to let Chad go after me.
Mm.
Chad, who you got?
Give me the Harvard of the South. Give me Vanderbilt.
Jeff?
I'm going to go against you guys on this one. I think Auburn's is a tougher team than they look. They just haven't finished games. Otherwise, they'd have more than 3 wins.
Yeah.
I think it's the game that they do finish. I think they get a lead at one point versus Vandy, and they don't let it go. So give me Auburn at home.
Jeff, the one fear I do have, and I'm sure you probably watched a little bit of their games this year, Hugh Freeze finally figured out, hey, we've got a horse at running back. We've got a Clydesdale. And what did we say in Alabama? What is that? The funny man, just run the damn ball. I think he finally got the picture. Look, if I lose to Kentucky, I might be packing my you-know-what. So would the boy get like 30 carries for 273 yards?
Yeah.
That's the one fear I have. But, again, I hate Auburn. I hate everything they stand for. They're our little sister, and that's on a good day. And Vandy beat Alabama. They almost beat Texas. Give me Vanderbilt on a last-second field goal to beat Auburn.
Well,
I got Vanderbilt as well. Here I thought, man, I was going to be able to make up some ground on this one. So we got Jeff as the only one taking
here.
Auburn.
Jeff's
Here's the big
riding
one.
it.
Here's the
Although
big
we've
one.
got Jay taking Auburn but we've got Debbie, Marty, Henry.
Debbie says Vandy by 2 touchdowns.
Oh, there we go, Debbie.
I'll
She don't
take
like
it.
Auburn either. She's a Georgia fan. She
I'll
don't.
take it, Debbie.
That's a bold statement, Cotton.
All right, so here is the game of the week. And who would have thought that Ohio State would be not only not the top of the Big Ten, but not even the second best team in the Big Ten. Right now they're sitting 4th in the country, 3.5-point favorites on the roads at 6-1, traveling to Penn State, who is undefeated at 7-0 and number 3 in the country. I think that Ohio State has not been playing good. They didn't play good this last week against Nebraska. I think Penn State's going to do it at home this week. I'm taking the Nittany Lions.
Brett?
The only thing that I fear, and Jeff is aware of this, those wide receivers for Ohio State. I mean, I want Penn State to win. I pull for Penn State. You know, Joe Pa and Bear had a good relationship back in the day. My heart's telling me Penn State, but my mind's telling me Ohio State. So what I usually go with, give me Penn State. Happy Valley, baby.
Jeff?
Well, the Penn State alumni in my family and my friend circles are not going to like me for picking this one. But once again, I'm going Ohio State on the road. Listen, Ohio State's a good team. The one loss came to Oregon, who I think Oregon is the one team that could probably beat both of these teams in that conference. So I believe when I look at this, I see Ohio State a complete offense, not the most overpowering quarterback play right now. We're going up against Penn State, who doesn't have a complete offense and doesn't have overwhelming quarterback play either, although people are very high on Drew Aller. I don't think he gets it done versus Ohio State. I think Ohio State comes in an unhappy valley and makes it a very unhappy weekend for him.
Chad?
Yeah, I'm going to have to go. They got to go. Ohio State's going to go on the road to Beaver Stadium. It's going to be a whiteout, I'm sure. So I'm going Penn State.
11 o'clock start, and the Penn State fans are not happy. You know, wild stuff usually happens in those night games, but now the 11 o'clock.
I can't believe that they made that an 11 o'clock game. I figured
either.
that had
Makes no
Yeah.
sense.
It's stupid.
Yeah, in the East, it's really weird to have an 11 o'clock kickoff in the East.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever. That's fine.
Well, that's
You
usually
got
what
Eric.
Michigan.
I
That
am
usually is the Michigan Ohio State game.
right.
It's usually an 11 o'clock game. So.
I am siding with the smartest football guy on this panel, and I am taking Ohio State for this reason only. I don't
care.
think you don't have to. But when football Jesus speaks, Chad, people listen. So I'm telling you, Ohio State cannot afford to lose this game. They can't.
They can't afford to lose any game. That's not a good.
Listen,
that's
they
not a
already
point.
had their can't afford.
They
to
can't
lose
afford to
game,
lose
and
any
that was in Eugene. They can't afford to lose another one.
And you realize we're fixing to drop a game on this one, right?
And so Ohio State, they're going to come in with a chip on their shoulder. They're going to try to establish, Oregon was a fluke. They might have been looking to the Penn State game last week. Ohio State, baby. Jeff, we're in on this one. Thanks for the game, boys. Thanks for the
Jeff,
game.
I don't buy this whole thing. They got to get a win. They got to get a win. Every team's got to win. Every team.
No.
It's a lousy excuse.
The
It's a lousy
football
reason.
playoff is
They
changed.
all have to get a
every
win.
game. You just
Penn
don't
State's gotta
want to lose
win.
2 games. You don't want to lose
So-
2 games, man.
Well, I think you can survive and get in the playoff with 2 losses if you're in Ohio State, because those guys are going to be ranked high enough that they still squeeze in there. It's the.
But look at who they beat, though. They're ranked high because of who they are. But who have they beat?
Yeah. Well, they play some tough opponents in their conference, but that's their conference. The Big Ten it's one of the toughest conferences. You're not going to get out there easy. Nebraska's not an easy opponent. They had a rough time with Nebraska. I think the only team that didn't have a rough time with Nebraska was Indiana. And Indiana's still looming for these teams as well. So they're nowhere in any shape, form safe. Even if they beat Penn State, they're not safe yet. They got a long way to go.
Lose to Penn State and still have Indiana to come.
Yeah,
that ain't good.
Yeah,
not good.
Well,
that's our next head coach at Alabama, Jeff, is Signetti. I like it.
Well, Debbie, Marty, Henry, they all got Penn State with us. The only one that's siding with Eric and Jeff is Jay.
I guess
all
we
he
shall
said is
see,
he's
but
taking Duff.
I like the fact that Brett is on your guys' side. That makes me feel
I'm picking with my heart. I want them to lose.
next
That's
game.
that's a better reason for Ohio State to win. Brett picking them than they have to win the game.
I agree.
Next game, number 10, Texas A&M is 2.5-point favorites at 7-1. Traveling to South Carolina against the Cox, who are 4-3. Saturday night prime time game.
A&M
Who
isn't
wants to go
dropping this
first?
one. A&M's not dropping this one. They have to win, Chad. They can't go to 2 losses. They have to win.
Will the entire campus explode if they don't win? Will it
Yes.
be wiped off the mat?
Might.
Yes.
Oh my word, that's pressure.
Just say you're taking A&M.
I'm taking A&M. I don't like picking against my Cox, but they've been kind of limp lately, so I'm done with them.
I apologize for one of my co-hosts, Jeff.
That's,
What do you got?
We've got
that's the only time. That's the only time you can say it and not feel dirty is when
Right.
you talk about South Carolina.
so we got
Why do you think he said it?
Yeah.
we got Jeff and Brett.
It's a
Jeff
total
and Brett are
dad
the only
joke. I was
two.
all over that.
Yeah.
Jeff and Brett are the only two that are keeping this from a clean sweep, even on the fan line.
Well, right now I'm going Texas A&M in this one. Listen, South Carolina is a fighter. I don't think they have enough fight to topple Texas A&M though.
South Carolina's got a defensive line, and they should have beat LSU at home, but they didn't. They could have beat Alabama on the road. All that being said, I think the line's about on point. Give me A&M by 3.
Well, there's a loss for everybody. Good job, South Carolina.
Okay, the final game and probably the most important game of the week.
Jeez, this is a total throw-in.
My 2 most hated teams in the entire country.
This looks like a 2002 score we should be picking.
Wisconsin at 5-3, traveling to the mighty Iowa City to play the Hawkeyes. The Hawkeyes are also 5-3 and are 3-point favorites. And even the powers that be of the NCAA knew that this had prime time written all over it. Saturday at 6:30 on NBC.
Set this game on prime time, and Penn State and Ohio State's at 11.
Yeah.
Well, I don't see this being a high-scoring affair, but I can see I can see Wisconsin coming in there and making it happen.
5-2.
That is one of the most prophetic things Jeff has said all night long. I don't see this being a high-scoring affair.
Yeah, this is. Yeah.
5-2, Wisconsin wins.
Yeah.
On the land.
If there's a single digit game, this is it. Yes. Yeah.
What's the over and under on this one?
Yeah. I'm taking the under. I don't even care. I don't need to hear
8.5.
Yeah.
So
you're taking
when
Wisconsin.
you guys all get done with the funny stuff, how about making a pick?
I can't believe Iowa's doing this to me again. The only team I hate more than the black and coward yellow are the piss throwers from Wisconsin. Jeff, Nebraska's first road game in the Big Ten was in Camp Randall. That next Monday, I'm listening to Sports Talk Radio down in Omaha, and 8 people in a row called in and said Wisconsin people were throwing cups of urine on them. They are the most despicable group of people ever. I hate it.
So we got a panel. We got a distinguished panel of 5, and none of us have made a pick yet. And we've got 5 viewers that have already put their picks in the comments.
Oh God, do I have to make? Give me Iowa by 3, and it's going to be like 12-9.
God,
who are you taking?
Yes,
he's taking
Iowa.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm still going to stick with my pick.
I love you, Brett.
I'm going to stick with my pick because Iowa.
Your football Jesus.
Iowa finally balled up and benched McNamara in favor of Sullivan. The offense looked better. They actually put points on the board. And, Vegas has them at a 3-point favorite, which is, the home favorite in a 5-3 game. So I am going to, for that reason, because Ferentz finally nutted up and said, McNamara, I know they said he got hurt, but Sullivan's going to start this game. And fortunately for the Hawkeyes, after that devastating loss to Michigan State, I didn't know they had a football team anymore. And then they picked on the smart kids from Northwestern. Give me Iowa. I hate saying that because Brett's over there, but I'm not changing my pick. That's my feeling, Chad. Who you got? You got the piss throwers or the squawks? What do you got?
I already picked the piss throwers. All right, I was
did?
the first one.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes,
all right.
As did I. I took.
Jeff's got the badges.
Oh my God! Look at that.
Yeah.
Ed, are you going to take the hometown team, or are you going to do opposite psychology and take Wisconsin? Just try to cover yourself.
Well,
he's going to
I'm going to hold out my pick
in the bassinet with Brett.
I'm going to hold out my pick, and we're going to take a break here before we start our NFL segment. And when we come back, I will unveil.
We're all on the edge of our seats.
I will unveil only as College Game Day can do. Who my pick is for this game.
Oh my God!
He got a Badger sweater.
He's going to come back in a Badger cheerleading outfit.
If he does, I'm out, boys. If he comes in some kind of cheerleader deal, I'm out.
It's your blood. Don't cry to us.
I love you, Jeff. I'm out, man. You guys
We will
can
be right back for the NFL segment.
And that's the bottom line. want a war? You're going to get one.
The cream rise to the top. Oh yeah.
Now you want to get nuts? Come on, let's get nuts.
Hard work pays off. Dreams come true. Bad times don't last, but bad guys do.
It's going to be a hard-fought game.
Ugh.
The ending is not going to be known till late into the night.
The punter's going to be the MVP.
Yeah. We love punters.
But when push comes to shove, now that they've taken, should I find out from Jeff? Have you graded McNamara?
Yeah, it's not very high.
It's not very high. It's not very high.
It's not very high, no.
But,
Jeff is so kind.
but as Lee Corso would say,
Oh, geez.
give me
If
the
he's got a
Hawkeyes.
Hawkeye
Oh my! What the hell is
what the
that?
hell is that?
Give me the Hawkeyes, baby.
That's the
You beat
sickest
up some
Hawkeye.
kid in
I've
an
ever
owl
seen.
outfit last
Yeah,
weekend.
what is that? An owl? What are we? Was it Temple?
My grandkids gave me that for Christmas last year. They were so proud of that because they said, Poppy, you can wear that on your show. So there you go.
All right,
You did it.
There you go.
All right.
Okay, all right. I mean,
So
I'm not gonna bash on grandkids, but
No.
I mean, I
no.
thought we were
by
picking,
the looks of that gift, they don't like you too much. That's all I gotta say.
I thought we were picking Temple there for them, missed the game or something. But, oh man, as I see it, I can make up a lot of games on Chad this week.
Can you believe, Jeff, this is the way I get treated?
Listen, at least they're joking about you into your face. It could be worse. It could wait until you get off the air.
Oh,
They
yeah.
did that last week.
Eric and Brett and I have a whole chat group where we just crush him.
Yeah, we just crush Ed all the time.
Yeah, that happened last week, Jeff. You're a little late on that.
This guy's a Hawkeye fan, a Viking fan. I mean, we got to put him on suicide watch or wellness check. It's crazy.
Hey, and everybody in the country knows he's a Vikings and a Hawkeyes fan.
Okay, we got to get to the NFL. This is a first. We're an hour and a half into the show, and we have not mentioned the NFL whatsoever. So, Jeff, we have a few things that we just want to get your opinion on. And one of the biggest things is, and I'll bring it up here, and we kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, but in your opinion, because obviously you have connections in the NFL, you're a scout, you watch, college, NFL, those types of things. And we watch, obviously we watch way more football than I should ever admit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still married, so that's, it must not be too much, but I'm shocked. Do you believe that, when you watch game to game, that the NFL has their darlings, their storylines, their teams that, seem to get the benefit of the doubt? And then are there teams that, if there's a call, it's going against them every single chance? And if not, how else do you explain some of the things that we've seen?
Do they have their darlings? Yeah, there were some teams that they don't want to see win for personal reasons, but doesn't mean that they'll stop them from winning. Let's face it. I don't think there's too many people in that office now that want to see Jerry Jones win a Super Bowl, because the fact of the matter is they know he's going to rub it in their faces and stuff like that. Bob Kraft being one of them. Okay, Bob Kraft can't stand that man winning anything. So there are things behind the scenes that are in play, but it doesn't affect the overall product, because the fact of the matter is they can't get caught having preferential treatment to something. We already had that whole thing when the Patriots were getting caught doing stuff, and they kept saying that Goodell was favoring Kraft, because every time you turn around in the press box, there's Goodell and Kraft sitting together, right? So they have to kind of, yes, they have people they would love to see win it, people they'd love never to see win it again. But the fact of the matter is they have to maintain that objectivity. Now, what we see with these referees are plain and simple. They're just bad officials. Okay, let's just face it. These officials are just very bad. And it's because of one thing. There's no accountability. You see it every week. You could turn on any game and watch things go from hold in this game to no hold in this game. DPI in this game to no DPI in that game. And it'll be the same play. Why? Because they don't call things the same way. You have officials that don't understand football. If you watch that Cowboy 49er game, okay, how you have two officials throw a flag for a DPI, for OPI, and then both of those guys pick up the flag. I've never seen two officials pick up a flag.
Right.
Okay? On the same play. All right. That's the first time I've ever seen that. Okay. Two officials pick it. So they just can't. They are not consistent. They don't understand what they're calling half the percent of the time. They call something. They have the retired official in the booth next to him explain it. His explanation doesn't match what you're seeing on the field. Nobody knows what the hell they're talking about. New York comes back with a totally different call. It's bad. Okay. And it's because there's no accountability. You don't have bad officials getting fired. Bad officials just don't get the referee playoffs. That's not a punishment. Okay.
Right.
So if you're not going to replace bad officials, those guys stick around till they get older. They lead crews. They train new officials who are going to be bad because they're being trained by the bad officials. And now you got another set of bad officials, right? Now we're adding in people who've never played the game, right? So as far as at the NFL level. So, okay, well, great. Now you have even more officials who don't understand what's going on trying to call this game. So it is a epidemic of bad officiating across the league. It looks bad because we have rooting interests, but I've watched the Chiefs get some badass calls against them too. But the one that they won the game with early in the season on that pass interference was pass interference. As a DB, that was pass interference. You can't get there that early and not expect to get flagged. But there are certain ones where it's just bad, but it's more because these guys just don't know what they're doing.
The example that I give.
Mm-hmm.
And I know Ed has a different example, but I want to let him stew on it just a little bit more. The example I give you is this. Last year, the Kansas City Chiefs led the NFL in holding penalties in the regular season.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? They led the NFL in the regular season in holding penalties. In the playoffs, 0.
Fewest. Yeah.
Now,
fewest.
When I watched that Super Bowl, I saw with my naked eye watching the TV, 5, 6 on huge plays. I mean, Bosa has him dead to rights. This guy has a hand right here, and Bosa can't get around. No flag. They complete a 3rd and 7.
Okay.
Those are the types of things that I mean, maybe as a fan, because
Eric, I want to say in their last 3 Super Bowl appearances, not to cut you off, that Kansas City has been called for this many holding calls in the last 3 Super Bowls.
And I didn't have really a dog in the fight. I wasn't necessarily a 49er fan or a Kansas City Chiefs fan, but I'm a Brock Purdy fan. Obviously, he graduated from Iowa State. Seeing what Mr. Irrelevant has been able to do, like I was actively rooting for him. But when you see those things, I think to myself, what's going on here? And then you watch a hit on Mahomes, he can get brushed. here comes the roughing the passer or whatever it is.
Well,
And
they
then
have no idea what they're calling with that stuff whatsoever.
watched-
That's an abomination every week.
Yeah, but I watched Justin Fields as a Chicago Bears fan get killed on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
And not one flag would ever get thrown for him. But Mahomes gets breathed on wrong, and here comes the mustard.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what we're talking about, right? So how the official interprets roughing the passer with certain people is what causes that disparity, right? So when Mahomes, while Mahomes does a lot of the same stuff that Justin Fields does and a little bit more, he's still considered a pocket passer. They officiate him like a pocket passer. With Justin Fields, on the other hand, they treat him like a runner, like Randall Cunningham and Mike Vick. So they let him take a beating a lot more because they go, well, he's more of a runner, and we kind of treat him like a runner. But that's not he's a quarterback. He's in the pocket. He's throwing the football. He gets the same treatment. But that's what we're talking about. You're talking about that hold on Bosa. Well, when we sat down with the head officials as coaches in my coaching capacity, when I coached NFL rules, they told us that when the hands on the inside framework of the body, so anything from here in, if there's a grab, they're not going to call it. They consider that fair game. Outside framework, outside the shoulders, on top of the shoulders, they're going to call that a hold. So when you see that guy trying to fight through and that hand's in here, they're not really supposed to call that. That's considered inside framework of the body. Now, I have seen one week where they don't call inside framework of the body, and then the next game they call it inside.
Here it comes.
I've seen it in the same game where one team doesn't get called for it, the other team does. So
in a big spot.
We've seen everything. We've seen leg whips that weren't leg whips, right? I've seen a guy get knocked to the ground. His leg flies up as he's falling backwards, and they call a leg whip. I'm sorry. I've never seen a guy unconsciously leg whip somebody. That's never.
Right.
Hey, leg whipping is an intentional foul. You have to be in the act of purposely trying to throw your leg out there to trip the guy. If you're getting knocked backwards, what's going to happen? Your legs are going to fly that way. Whatever. So how is that leg whipping? So once again, that's what I mean by the interpretation of the rules. By making it so subjective, this is what's happened, and it gets so bad because as a guy who's I've coached below the NFL, but it was adults. But nevertheless, I've coached that. I've coached high school now. I still scout college, and I go to games, and I'm going, what are these guys calling? I'm coaching high school games, and I'm losing my stuff. Thank God I'm up in the booth and not on the field because they would hear my mouth a little too much, because I'm known for pushing referees to their limit as a coach. But it's bad. You've seen the pancake block where the lineman lays on the guy after he buries him in the ground. We've had that called as a personal foul. Talk about that's a personal foul every day in my book. The next night, guess what? Somebody else does it. No foul call. No, that's legal. How you can have officials that don't see things, and you're all trained the same way, right? So It is not, you're all reading the same manual. So how you can have different people reading the same manual, whether it's the same day, whether it's the same game, and they come up with different stuff from moment to moment, is exactly why. There's no consistency. So when you as a fan, you're going to see it because you're polarized already. I want this team to win. I want this team to lose. And when you're seeing that, and you're going, oh, see, they're helping these guys. Listen, the Chiefs don't need any help. They're very good as they are. All right. So they don't really need the officials helping him. There's times I'm watching going, ooh, yeah, that's a bad call. And there's times I'm going, yeah, he did do that. But
here's what adds credence to, you have a lot of fans that are just convinced that pro sports is fixed.
Yeah. Well, with Vegas more involved now, that's not hard to believe anymore.
So the Thursday night game, Vikings-Rams, believe me, the Vikings did enough that game to result in a loss.
Yeah.
But to have the head referee come out after the game on the face mask on Sam frickin' Darnold at the end of the game, and say that they didn't have a view, no one had a good view. But yet this
they were right there.
But yet this comes out, and there's a referee in plain sight looking straight at the guy getting his face mask pulled.
Well, what's more egregious, right, is while he's looking at it from the back, there's a guy on the other side of the line of scrimmage looking right
Yeah,
at
there was
that.
two. There was two.
He's looking right at it and goes. But
I didn't see it. You know,
once again, I have.
My thing with the
Yeah, I have come to the conclusion. Yeah,
go ahead, Jeff.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, no, I've just seen it on every level now to the point where, and what's sad is I've seen guys that I've seen at the high school level working major conference football. I've seen guys working major conference football out there on Sundays. They're mingled in together. So you got bad referees at three levels.
Well, see, that's my thing on college and pro. Say, there's certain crews, and they even say it in the booth. There's certain crews in certain college games and pro games where they tell you beforehand this crew's known for throwing a lot more flags or having. I mean, it's like you've got a bunch of Angel Hernandezes out there to throw baseball in, refereeing football, and it's like the Alabama game in Knoxville. The guy's taunting our guy all up in his face. Our guy responds and pops him. Okay, well, I get that. They usually catch the second guy. That's fine. But the dude returns a favor and clips our guy. And our guy gets a 15-yard penalty. Why was that not offsetting penalties? That was the last drive of the game. That was a very important drive.
Listen.
I mean, you can't justify that. Because if you saw one guy hit one guy, how did you not see the other one return the favor? I mean,
I'll tell you the most egregious thing I see when it comes to officiating is not even the calls. The guys are going to blow calls in some of the worst ways, but it's the guys that see whatever the foul is. The play ends, and about a good 20 seconds after the play ends, the flag finally flies.
Right.
What were you thinking about this whole time?
Right.
Where you saw the foul when you finally threw the flag.
And it depends on what team bench they're on. Have you ever noticed if they're on that team's bench, they're a lot more likely to throw the flag than if they're on the opposing team's bench.
Yeah, and if you saw pass interference is technically subjective, but if you understand DB play, you know how to call it, right? If you see that guy, and there's always going to be contact when you're in man coverage with a receiver. Why? Because even when you're looking back for the football, you have to have a hand to know where he is. So there's always going to be some kind of hand play.
And that's legal if you're looking back for the ball.
Yes.
Right.
So when you have that, and the receiver purposely pushes the guy, and they go, oh, well, they were hand fighting. No, hand fighting is when they're running together doing this.
Right.
Okay. But when I turn back to do this isn't hand fighting. I have to know where he is. If my eyes are this way, the only other way to do it is to have my hand there to feel it. They call it at times where they call it, DPI. You're not allowed to keep chucking him down the field or illegal contact. If I'm turning my back to the guy and running and I'm looking for the ball this way and I'm touching and feeling where he is, if it looks like a shove, it doesn't mean I'm shoving the guy. Because I have to know. How do you shove somebody without knowing they're there? That's the amazing trick I don't see too many people able to do, to go, hey, I'm going to shove you without looking at you. It doesn't happen. Right?
If you make me get my head around, my eyes around the football, you can't take away my ability to at least know where the receiver's at.
Yeah.
And how else can I do that? I've got to put a hand on. Now, if he grabs him, if he, pulls him, whatever, I get that. To me, those scenarios are easy. But in pass interference, if I do not see a defensive guy altering, grabbing, pushing, I'll just say pushing and altering the same thing, I don't understand how pass interference gets called like it does at times.
Well, I'll tell you one that's pass interference that never gets called. Well, almost never gets called, but it gets called on the receiver as OPI a lot more frequently, right? And that's when you have those two guys running down the field and that DB locks up the arm right?
Yeah.
And he looks back like this, but he's got the arm locked, right? So that receiver has to push the arm free off to get free, and they throw the flag on the receiver for pushing off. If you're going to let the guy lock the arm, you can't call him for pushing off.
Correct.
You can't have it both ways. You can't let the guy lock the arm in. That's holding. that's pass interference when the ball's in the air if he's doing that, right? So by rule, you have to understand they just don't get it. So what happens is you get guys that throw stuff and they come up with the most ridiculous reason why. Okay, when you have a deep ball and the DB is in trail, and the receiver gets on top of him, but the ball's underthrown. So the DB is like, okay, I got my interception. And now, as he's going backwards to get that ball, the receiver's there and tries to come back for the ball, and then they make contact. And they throw the pass interference. The receiver has a right to the ball. Well, technically, so does the DB, especially when the DB has position, right? So if I'm a DB and that man is running a hitch in front of me, I can't come through him to get to the football.
Right.
So why is the receiver allowed to come through me when the ball is coming to me to get to the football? And I get penalized for it. You know what I mean?
That's why the reason like cornerback is the hardest position in sports to play.
When you say that,
that's what I've always said, cornerback, man. I mean, because they favor the offense so much, and you're out on that island, and if the quarterback gets 3 or 4 seconds, that's about the max you're going to see someone be able to stick with the receiver. You know.
My thoughts on reffing are there are fouls on every single play. There are probably 2 or 3 fouls on every single play. What they need to focus on is those ones that are repeated over and over again, that are slowing the game down or giving a certain advantage, and not interrupt the flow of the game. When there are 30 flags thrown in a game, it's like it's not watchable.
And it's so choppy in it. So, Jeff, I got a quick question for you. Oh, I'm sorry. The flag that drives me crazier is say on a running play, right? And the guy ends up breaking one, for a touchdown or 50 yards, and you go on left tackle. And there's a right tackle or a tight end over, 15 yards over to the right that gets called while the running back's already 5 yards past the line for holding. Do you think they will ever change that to where if it doesn't really affect the play, eat your flag, or no? That's one. I'm 44 years old, and that's driven me crazy. The whole 40 years I've watched football. Do you ever foresee that changing?
That is a discretionary issue,
right?
Because I've had it when I was a coach. I've had it as when I played. I've been on the backside of a play, and the guy's grabbing me up. I'm like, holding, and he goes, "You're on the backside of the play. You're never going to get there. There's no point in me calling that."
But I like that. Sorry,
as a coach, I like it. I like it. Listen, I realize this guy has no impact on a play from 10, 15, 20 yards in trail. He may make a tackle 50 yards down the field, but he's not going to make an impact on a play right here. So why would I call that? Okay, we've seen that called. I've had that called this year.
But you've seen refs that have ate their flag. That's the problem. Each game, each official is different. Yeah.
Well, I hate it when they eat their flag when it happens right in front of them. That's the part that bothers me.
Point of fact. Jeff, you and I both coach football still.
Yeah.
And the thing that irritates me the most, and I know it irritates you too, I can live with officials eating their flags. What I cannot live with is when they eat their flags at the point of attack.
Yes.
You can have all sorts of holding back here, but like Brett said, if we're running off left tackle and there's a holding on the right tackle, at least at our level, at the high school level, that's probably unaffected. Now, you can argue that as you maybe get into the NFL, that defensive end, that he could run the play down. But I'm saying in high school, you don't have a whole lot of dudes when we're running straight left tackle that they're going to make an impact. Let that go. It's when the penalty happens at the point of attack, I cannot stand that, and I lose my mind.
Yeah, the main thing we coaches want is consistency.
Right.
If you're calling it consistent every time, we know what to expect. we won't have too many problems. No, we won't like it when we're not the beneficiary of those calls, but we will understand how things are called, and we will relent and not be as combative with officials when things go wrong. The problem is there is no consistency. So when you get things that happen and they're called and they just don't fit, and 1 minute it's this, 1 minute it's that, you're furious because it doesn't make sense why all of a sudden you're calling it now, but you weren't calling it 2 drives ago, or you didn't call that last week, but you're calling it this week. Why? My runner is tackled here in front of me on my sideline, but the guy on the opposite sideline is trying to spot the ball 2 yards back from 53 yards away. That makes that's not consistent. Okay, that's what makes coaches go nuts, because why do we go nuts? Because plain and simple, things like that don't make any sense to us. And regardless how much you may think you know the rules, make something make sense to us. There's no reason why a guy 53 yards away should be spotting the ball on the other sideline. There's no reason why you're letting a hold go on at the point of attack, but you're calling one from 10 yards behind the play. That's the kind of stuff that drives coaches nuts.
Yeah, this actually happened to us this year.
Yeah.
Opposite sideline judge throws a flag for horse collar. On the opposite side of the field, we're on that side of the field.
Mm-hmm.
Sideline judge on our side of the field, who is 15 feet away from the play, doesn't throw a flag. So the guy from the opposite side of the field, 40 yards away from the play, flag comes locked because all he saw was the guy going like this.
Mm-hmm.
He throws the flag. Well, the guy on our sideline saw it for what it was, and it wasn't. But guess what? It gets enforced. They don't pick it up. And I think to myself, when you see those, I know it's only high school, fine, whatever. But when you see some of those things at the highest levels, you're like, what are we doing here? Because the one thing that I've always said about officials, and I know time we're getting here, but the one thing I always say about officials is this. I realize it's not an easy job. Okay.
No.
Every call you make, that side's going to hate me. That side's going to love me. And then the next call I make, that side's going to hate me and that side's going to love me. But the advantage that officials have is when they go home, they wake up the next day, they go to their job or they do whatever they're going to do, and they can lose zero sleep over it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what the coaches and players are left with? The calls you made.
Mm-hmm.
I.e., we don't know what Minnesota, I don't want to dig on Ed, but we don't know what Minnesota does on that drive if that face mask is called right in front of that guy. Now, Minnesota is left with the what ifs all week long. They got an extended, we'll call it the mini bye week with the Thursday night game. They have to deal with it all week long. That official, I'm in Chicago this week, or I'm in Tampa Bay this week. You see them, like they just get to go on and do their thing, where the teams have to live with those decisions. As a coach, that's where I've always had the issue, is you get to go home in your warm bed, wake up tomorrow, Saturday morning, Sunday morning, Monday morning, whatever level you officiate at, and you get to go on with your day. We have to deal with the consequences of those calls. Minnesota's dealing with the consequence of, that everybody on TV and everywhere else, but apparently the guy who's 10 feet away can't see. And so you don't know how that drive ends up. I'm not making excuses. The Bears shouldn't have won that game anyway, but you see all those holding penalties, 2 of them there.
Yeah.
Well, it's a Hail Mary. I don't care. It was a hold at the point of attack that you did not call that resulted in a lost game. Now who has to deal with it? The Bears deal with it, and the Commanders don't, because they won the game.
Yeah.
That's the thing that's always frosted me coaching, is like, you walk off this field, you're done with it. I have to work through it, and I have to deal with it. So does our team. That's the thing that's always just irked me about officials.
I say it all the time. Bad players get cut, bad coaches get fired, bad officials work every week, right? So, I think the most annoying thing about the whole situation is that we coach, and we got to be perfect, right? We got to make sure we're doing things the right way. We can't set a bad example for the kids. We have to make sure we're
Working all
knowledgeable
week.
with, right? We have to do
All
all
week.
this stuff. There's all this stuff we have to do. And at the end of the day, that you could take your officiating classes, get certified, and never have to do anything again but show up and get paid more than the coaches. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So not only are you getting hosed by these guys, you're going to get hosed by guys that make more than you.
Yeah.
Okay. So that is the
100%.
most humbling thing about it all is you're as a high school coach, you're making less than the guys officiating the game, and they're out there giving you the hose, and you can't do it. You can't yell at them because they're going to kick you out and suspend you. You can't say too much about them to the association because it's going to fall on deaf ears. You say anything too about the parents all you want, you're crying in your milk, right? But at the end of the day, they're going to work Tuesday, Thursday, Friday down here. Some of them are working Saturdays. Well, most of them are working Saturdays anyway. So 4 or 5 days a week, they're getting paid to do games. You're working 4 or 5 days a week. You're getting paid whatever stipend you're getting. So while yours is fixed, they're just going.
Yeah.
Right.
That's exactly right.
So that's the frustrating thing about it.
We got a pretty long list of games we got to go through for pick'em. So.
We got to get to one more topic, kid. I just got to hear it real quick. Here it is, Jeff. We're going to leave the floor to you. What is going on here? I mean, what do you see? I mean, you obviously can look at players. You look at players differently than we do. You know, I don't think it takes a genius to see that Aaron Rodgers is not what he was. Okay, we know that
he wasn't what he was. Yeah,
we can see
he wasn't
that.
what he was
the
the
average
last couple of years in Green Bay.
Yeah, the average guy can see that. But what is going on? Here, I'll give you my quick opinion. I think they fired the best coach they had on staff. I'll leave it with that. Like, what do you think's going on with the Jets?
What's going on with the Jets is a mess that starts from the top, right? The owner wanted what he wanted. He wanted this GM to come in and fix things. They wanted Adam Gase before. That didn't work out. They brought in Robert Saleh, right? Saleh's the guy who's going to come fix everything. Well, you had to give him what he needed. They gave him a young quarterback. They didn't want to be patient with the young quarterback. They moved on from that quickly. Well, we got to go get a veteran. So they bring in Aaron Rodgers. But what you brought in was a problem. You brought in an aging quarterback who wants things his way, who wants say in how things are done, but he doesn't want any of the blame. Okay, so what do we see? They got Aaron Rodgers. They worked out this big trade. They went and signed guys he wanted, right? They brought in all these guys here.
Lazard, Cobb,
they brought in
Nathaniel Hackett.
Yeah, they brought in Nathaniel Hackett, right, to be his OC. It has to have Hackett, right? He goes out there the first year, he gets hurt the first game. Okay, mulligan for that, right? They come back this year. Last year when he came in here, he did all the stuff to prove he was a different guy, right? I show up for mini camps. I'm here for all the training camp. I'm working with everybody. What did he do this year? He went back to typical Aaron Rodgers. I'm going to go into hiding for a few weeks,
guys.
I'll
be
retreat.
I'm going to Egypt.
I'm going to come in for training camp, but I'm not going to play in the preseason games, really, guys. I'm just going to come in and rest my arm, and So when you start out of rhythm, is because this is why he's back to being the same guy he was in Green Bay, where he didn't want to work with the young receivers because he was too busy doing his own thing. They were out of sync. It took him 8 games to get on track, right, when they finally got things going. And yes, they would make the playoffs, but then he goes into the playoffs and scores 7-10 points and loses. Okay, this you're not an elite quarterback anymore. Okay, you're living off name power alone now. So you need to go out there and work harder. Tom Brady worked harder. Peyton Manning, even when his arm was dying, worked harder, right? None of those guys ever said, okay, we're going to disappear. He's the one with all the arm talent left still and just going to disappear. But what you're seeing now is a guy that can't escape the pass rush like he used to, a guy who may still have that arm talent, but is a little slower in releasing that ball down the field now. So now he's getting a little gun shy. So now we're starting to see a older, slower Aaron Rodgers. And when guys aren't where he's supposed to be, he's not as accurate as he once was. He's never going into the mirror and saying, I'm not playing that great, I'm this. When he does admit something. Now it's an injury that's bothering him. Oh, it's this injury that I have, my calf, my knee, my toe. Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre, they're parallel careers, right? Both of them go and they make a great problem when the organization that they built up and won their one successful year with, right? And then they go somewhere else and do this. Okay. It's an amazing parallel that both of them have done the same thing. So at this point, when you're looking at his career, it's the exact same story in a different chapter. Okay, he is doing it again to the Jets, what Brett Favre did to them and Minnesota. So if he would just have gone out there and just done the work and worked with the guys he had, with those two running backs behind him, they could hide the deficiencies of that offensive line. You have all these receivers. The play action game is what's going to help those guys get open. But instead, he has to be the guy checking at the line and doing all the stuff he was doing in Green Bay when you're not that guy anymore. Sometimes you got to let people help you. And that's the problem. He's not that guy. Peyton Manning realized that, got one more ring out of it before he retired. I can't throw it around 50 times anymore. I'm going to let these dudes run the ball, and I'm going to throw it 20 times. We're going to get a ring out of it. If Aaron Rodgers would make that kind of decision to say, you know what, that's a smart thing to do, let me do that, they would have been all right. The Jets may have actually won some games the last few weeks.
Because Aaron don't have that personality, and everybody on here knows that.
Yeah. So he's his own worst enemy. And unfortunately, that organization let him have too much say in everything that's going on. Now you are living and dying on Aaron Rodgers instead of being able to say we have a very good team that could win by doing other things. But you can't get past that Aaron Rodgers has to have his way.
That's another thing. You get a 40-year-old quarterback and you don't improve the offensive line too. To me, that's on the Jets. I mean,
But they thought they did, right? They brought in Tyron Smith. Well, Tyron Smith's a Pro Bowler. Well, Tyron Smith hasn't had a complete season in several years.
Right.
He's a shell of himself. And you're starting to see that now. They got the young rookie lineman. Well, the rookie was supposed to come in there and learn from these guys. But, now he's out there making rookie mistakes. The other guys that you brought inside just haven't lived up to the money that you paid them. So, but once again, if you run the football, they don't have to protect as much as they're trying to do now. But because Aaron's trying to be Aaron, I can throw and do everything I did in my youth. Well, you're finding out he can't, but he doesn't realize he can't. And that's the worst thing of it all is he has too much say in the offense. He has too much say in the organization. And it's all coming back to, if you're going to be able to put all this weight on yourself and try and win, you got to be able to do it. And he can't.
And you mentioned Brett Favre in the parallel. It's the same franchises that are making the same mistakes over and over. And
but I will tell you this, and I think the difference, and this is why, I hate to say it because I'm a Bears fan, but I do like Brett Favre. I hated him in a Packers jersey. I get it because he owned us. It is what it is. But Brett Favre was never that way. Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers, the personalities and the way that they are. Aaron
Favre don't even speak to his family.
No, Brett Favre did not go to Minnesota and say, "Listen, you have to do this, you have to do that." Yeah, Brett Favre was still trying to play like 25-year-old Brett Favre. Now, did it ultimately cost the Vikings? I'm sorry, Ed. Did when he threw across his body and threw the pick. I get, but here's the deal: he didn't come into Minnesota and say, I have to have this, I have to have that.
That's true.
I want this guy, I want this guy, I want that. He just came into Minnesota and said, hey, I'm Brett Favre, I'm going to do the best I can. Where Aaron Rodgers comes in and says, listen, I need Nathaniel Hackett. I know he didn't work out in Denver, but he's my guy. Alan Lazard is a good number 2, but we got to bring him in too. Oh, and hey, by the way, can we get Randall Cobb out of retirement, instead of retiring, have him come here to the Jets? Because I like him too. When you do all those things, Robert Saleh, I feel bad for the guy because at least he had his side of the ball, right?
Yeah.
And now you've seen since they fired him, what's the defense done? Has regressed.
Well, you got Garrett Wilson. You got Garrett Wilson, who's a very talented wide receiver, and he's the one getting knocked for not being on the same page with Aaron Rodgers. Well, he was at the mini camps.
Yeah.
He was everywhere waiting to be thrown to. He wasn't the one sitting in the dark,
100%.
So,
Well, I will say this: Brett Favre's last 3 or 4 years in Green Bay, he did skip camp. He
Yeah,
did. You
but
got to give him. You got to give him credit. He's like, look, I'm good. I ain't doing all this shit
well,
that these rookies have to do. But there's consequences to that.
but that's where he learned it from, right? He was there when all that was
Yeah.
going on. So what
Yeah.
did he do? What did he do the last couple of years in Green Bay? Yeah, I'm going to go on a retreat. You know what, guys? Maybe you should trade me unless we can restructure my contract. Okay, we restructure my contract. Great. What do we do now? All right, let's go play. I'm going to skip the time and work out on my own. I'm going to do my stuff and come back. We'll be all right. And then
When Love got drafted, Aaron Rodgers was so butthurt. There's not a level of butthurtness that's on the scale. I mean, the night that they drafted Love, I mean,
But
whew.
the difference between Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre is, and I think this is probably true, and maybe you guys would disagree. I think players love to play with Brett Favre.
Yeah.
I don't think players love to play with Aaron Rodgers.
Supposedly a lot of his teammates like him and have liked him, and he's got a lot of loyal guys from Green Bay, but I don't think anyone else likes him. I mean,
if I was Alan Lazard, Aaron Rodgers made Alan Lazard a wide receiver in the NFL.
Yeah.
So if I can understand why Alan Lazard would fall on the sword for him, I totally get it. And some of the others.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that Aaron Rodgers didn't make guys better. I just don't know if your offensive guard was all in on Aaron Rodgers, like maybe with Favre, or your right guard or your left guard, or maybe your center, whoever it was. Like, I just don't think that they had the same connection. So I don't think you get the same, that Brett Favre would have gotten.
There's very few guys I've known to come out of the locker room and not like either one of those guys. So I can't say that. I think their abrasiveness was more towards coaching and management than it ever was with the locker room. I think the locker room was never really their problem. From what I've remembered with those guys, it's always been above those guys. You couldn't tell those guys what to do after a while. And even in Minnesota, with the coach they had there in Minnesota when Favre got there was only so much he could say to Brett Favre because he realized his voice didn't have enough bark to kind of talk Brett Favre down. So he kind of had to roll with it. Even when that second season, when everything went bad with him there, he kind of had to fall on the sword for Brett because he couldn't blame anything on Brett, although Brett wasn't playing worth a darn that season anyway. But to the point, he had to just eat it because you weren't the bigger voice in the room. And 10-1, if anything went wrong, they were going to fire you before they replaced Brett Favre. So, so it was kind of that situation where you had to make it work and you needed Brett or else. And that's kind of what's been the case with those two guys. Even with Aaron Rodgers, you couldn't do it. So when you start to see him act out towards Robert Saleh, everybody said, well, Robert Saleh is on the hot seat. Why? Because if anything goes wrong, they're not going to be like, all right, well, maybe we need to bench Brett, bench
Roger.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. We don't need to bench Aaron and move on. No, they're going to say, well, coach, you got to go. we got to appease this quarterback who's, we built this team for. So that's kind of the situation that they're in, is plain and simple.
But he's 41 years old. It's just the Jets have just set themselves up for many years of misery.
But they sacrificed everything to win now. And this is when you make those bets, it better happen or else. Well, they're finding out the or else. Okay, it didn't happen, and now you're facing the or else. You're now stuck in a situation where you got a lot of young talent, and by the time you figure out what's next after Aaron Rodgers, this young talent's either going to get older or be gone.
They definitely went all in. I'll agree with you there.
Oh yeah.
All right. We got to get to the picks.
Got to get to the picks. First game. Houston and the Jets that we were just talking about.
Well, going to the Jets, who are 2-6. I'm still trying to figure out how Jets are 2-point favorites in this game. But
yeah, well, I already made this pick on Sunday. I already picked Houston. I've been burned by the Jets picking all season.
Yeah.
I won't be picking them anytime.
Me
I'm
too.
with you, Jeff. I'm taking Houston. There's no question. I'm taking Houston.
I got Houston. Brett's got Houston, and Chad.
Yep, I've got Houston.
Oh, I thought you were going to go with the Jets.
All right, next game we got Dallas, who's 3-4, traveling to Atlanta, who's 5-3. Atlanta's 2.5-point favorites.
Well, until Dallas gets a pass rush, I'm taking Atlanta.
Yeah, I too am taking Atlanta. I just have zero faith, and Dallas looks like an absolute dumpster fire. I don't know, man.
Yeah, you're missing your top 4 pass rushers. You can replace one. You might be able to replace 2. 3 and 4, yeah, that's hard to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dirty Birds.
Dirty Birds for Brett.
Chad?
Yeah, give me the ATL.
Yeah, I got to go with Atlanta, too. That's a clean sweep.
Washington at the G-Men.
I just will go in right off the bat. I'm taking Washington again. I'm still at a loss at how the line can be so small on this.
It's the NFL.
Washington's 3.5-point favorites, but I took Washington. Who else?
I got Washington.
Commanders.
Jeff's got the Commanders. What about you, Brett?
Washington.
Chad?
Yeah, give me the Redskins.
Then we got the Chicago Bears, 4-3, traveling to Arizona. Arizona's 4-4, and they have been established as 1-point favorites.
Chad, you're high on Arizona. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, give me Arizona.
Jeff?
Oh man! After that loss, I'm thinking the Bears rebound here.
Brett?
That's what I'm worried about. How that they're not going to recover from that anytime soon. Give me Arizona.
Well, I am taking Chicago again only because Brett took Arizona.
I figured you were waiting on me, and I hope I'm wrong.
I'm taking Chicago as well. I mean, Chicago's defense is legit, and when you can go into Washington and keep that game the way
other than a Hail Mary, it was 4 field goals.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
so I think they'll keep Arizona under wraps. Big game of the weekend, 6-1 Detroit, 3.5-point favorites over the 6-2 Green Bay Packers, who just are sickening with how they would pull out games, man. They are the masters of the walk-off field goals.
I'm taking Detroit.
Oh, at Lambeau, it's a hard call. You know what? Give me Green Bay at home.
Chad?
Yeah, give me the Loins.
Brett?
One pride, Detroit. Sorry, fellas.
Oh, boy.
I was going to take Green Bay, but then again, I just look at Detroit. Detroit's just popping on all cylinders right now. They're playing their outstanding football.
Flip-flopping on us. You always accuse me of doing that. But you
Who you
take? You're flip-flopping.
No, I was well, I didn't tell you when I changed my mind, but I'm going to Detroit.
Oh, all right.
So
I think we all picked Detroit because we hate Green Bay.
I definitely do.
So we got 3-4 Rams, who just happened to get their 2 best receivers back right before they played Minnesota. At Seattle, who's 4-4, who it used to be a tall order to go into Seattle and beat Seattle, but
They haven't won a home game this year, have they?
Seattle's dropping home games like crazy this year. I don't understand it, but
That's insane.
Rams are 2-point favorites, and I am taking the Rams.
As am I.
Yeah, I've backed the Hawks several weeks now, and they've blown it every time. So I'm going to go with the Rams as well.
Jeff's got the Rams.
I got the Rams. Sorry.
Chad?
Yeah, Seattle is they're so bipolar.
How did they go to Atlanta 2 weeks ago and just dominate them?
I don't understand it. Give me the Rams. I think are going to turn it on and make a playoff run here. Give me the Rams.
So the last game we have, I put on there for a reason, because I remember Jeff before the season started. He was really high on the Buccaneers, and I think if the Buccaneers didn't go into big time wide receivers dropping like flies, they'd be in a lot better position right now. But I just can't see Tampa Bay with their two top receivers out going into Kansas City and winning. So I got KC.
Yeah, I'm taking Kansas City because of the injuries. Even if Mike Evans definitely isn't back this week. They played decent enough last week versus Atlanta, but it wasn't enough, and it's not going to be enough to stop Kansas City at home with the additions that they're making.
Let me ask you something, Jeff. Trey Palmer, why with down so bad in receivers, and he had such a good year last year, why isn't Tampa trying to get him the ball more?
I think this because of a different offense. One, they're relying on a different set of skills this year. They're trying to attack more down the field. They're trying to do a lot of different things than what Canales was doing. Canales used his guys to get down the field, but he ran a lot more underneath stuff, a lot of pick stuff, a lot of not more of the play action concepts. But he was more of in a perimeter game with the screens as well. So they do all of that just like he did, but they're a lot more motion and creating matchups. He wasn't a great matchup guy. He kind of fed off of those other guys. Without those other guys, he really wouldn't be the guy to separate too much. You know what I mean? Now that you know what to look for, because it was different when you had Evans and Godwin out there. You had to worry about those guys going vertical, and then you put Palmer. There's three of them. McMillan out there and Palmer, you know what to look for. Cade Otton is not a vertical threat, so they don't really have that vertical threat at tight end. They haven't had it since Gronk was here. So it's all about those receivers. You know who's going vertical. You know who's creating all these matchups, who's able to win the possession battle. They're struggling with the possession battle right now at wide receiver, and they have speed to get vertical. But that's their biggest challenge. So they have to run the ball effectively and do all that stuff. And I think the best thing that's happened to him is Bucky Irving, because he allows them to do a lot of other things, especially with those receivers out.
Okay, thanks.
So, Chad, now that you've used Jeff's breakdown of this, are you going to make a pick or?
Yeah, give me the Chiefs.
Oh, geez. Brett? You gonna pick
Unfortunately, the Chiefs because they beat me to death this year, and even though I can't stand them, and I don't care what Jeff says, the refs are cheating for them. Just go ahead and put a dress on Mahomes and put flags on him because nobody's allowed to touch him. Sorry, Jeff, I'm not a fan.
No, listen, I understand. Listen, when I'm watching the games at times when I'm not doing analysis and I'm watching my team, trust me, I'm yelling at the screen just as much as everybody else. And then when that's over, I get to go back to work. So, but for that 4 hours of watching my team, even though I am analyzing the game anyway, because it's just me, I'm yelling and cussing and carrying on because I see the same things. But, like I said, it happens both ways. There's times when I'm going, we shouldn't have gotten that call. And then there's times I'm like, when are you going to give us a call? So,
right.
It's like, yeah, I get it. I get it. Trust me. I get it.
Yep.
Who you got, Eric?
What's that?
Who you got, Eric?
I already said KC.
Oh, you did?
I
missed that.
I mean, I was like the first guy on almost every pick, so whatever, Chad.
Right.
That's a lie.
I mean, I was out.
Football Jesus just lied. I don't know.
I was out in front of
and everything.
Oh, I don't think the only one I was out in front of was maybe Ohio State, Penn State. I think I went fourth on that one. Ed's the one that's sandbagging, so we shouldn't be letting him go last. He's
sandbagging. I'm the one that's shoot. How many of them did I start off by giving my pick?
Oh my God, you took the easy one.
Jeez.
Ridiculous, man.
So are you taking the Chiefs?
Well, yeah.
What?
I mean,
Yeah, Ed took the Chiefs.
Yeah, I took the Chiefs. It's
Yeah,
been so long ago, you don't even remember.
Yeah.
he doesn't have a headset or anything or a headgear he can throw on for the Chiefs, but maybe he can throw that ugly owl back on and
Man, there's some slim pickings where that bird's been feeding.
I love it.
He didn't fly down the south and get some of these ribs. I know that.
Well, I think that wraps it up, Ed.
That does wrap it up.
Week what is this? Episode 15 for the year. Man, it's flying by. Feels like we just started and brought the new guy on, and I mean Brett, still
Damn greenhorn.
I mean, I remember my first show, Brett. It's a good job. But no,
when I was still allowed to light up during the show.
Yeah, geez. Oh my God. Though that feels like the Stone Age back then, but
So
Hey, we'll come back from break and you'll see me like trying to get the smoke away. You know?
But no, I want to thank you, Jeff, for coming on, man. I love talking football with you, dude. I mean, it's awesome. I love hearing some of the inner workings, and you're piped into different things that obviously we aren't, but I mean, I love it, man. I love it.
Listen, always a pleasure, guys. The beauty of being a media scout as opposed to a team scout is I can talk football to anybody. I ain't got to hide stuff for my GM. So that's the beauty of it all. It's like I get to just talk about the draft like nobody's business. It's fun to do. There's no other purpose to collecting all this information to not share it. So,
Right.
The best thing in the world is being able to come out and talk to everybody about it. And, if you're not educating people on the draft, I think you're doing the Cardinals sin to fans, because fans should know whether first, seventh, third, fourth, sixth round free agent, you should know who's coming into your team and how they have a chance of contributing. I remember being that fan back in the day, looking in the paper at the draft and seeing names in the late rounds, and I'm going, who the heck are these guys? I had no idea, so it's nice to see the guys on ESPN and NFL Network talk about it, but they're only talking about one out of every 50 guys in day 3. So the beauty of it is that when we're doing it, we're talking about everybody, in leading up to the draft, during the draft when we're live. That's one of the beautiful things of it is we're sitting there on the board and we're talking about literally everybody on that board, because we want to make sure when fans know they're getting somebody, they have a reason to be excited about them or a reason to worry.
And the thing, I mean, just being in your position, there's got to be times where you're thinking, wow, that team nailed that one. And then there's got to be times you're like, what the hell are they doing? And that's most of us Bears fans back in the day when they drafted at number 2. The name of Mitch Trubisky. I was like, who? The North Carolina quarterback? He started like 12 games. What are we doing?
My wife had to calm me down that day. I'll never forget.
Oh my God! I can remember that draft like it was yesterday.
I was screaming.
I'll tell you this draft. We sat here all 3 days, and we were just sitting there going, Howie Roseman must be like a Sith Lord, because he had everything literally falling to him that you couldn't imagine. The top corner falls to him in the first round. One of the top corners falls to him in the second round. He gets safeties. He gets running backs. He gets linebackers. Anything he wanted, he got in this draft. It was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen. I had never seen anybody nail a draft from top to bottom like that, with things falling to him that you couldn't imagine.
Yeah, and Cooper DeJean, I know you're talking about him in the second round.
Yeah.
He grew up 15 miles south of me. Mm-hmm. I'm telling you, that dude is going to end up being the steal of the draft. He's
going to be a very good player. You know, there was a young man, Riley, that came out a couple of years ago from Iowa too. That was a really good corner. I watched him at Senior Bowl, and I said, okay, he's one of my favorite guys, other than when Sidney Brown was in that secondary.
Riley Moss. Yep.
Yeah, right. And Riley Moss is starting in the NFL right now. So you talk about there were guys on the board, and what we're finding now, Senior Bowl used to be, you know, if you didn't have day one guys, you had, you know, second and third rounders there now. And now you have guys that are going to be second rounders, third rounders, late day three guys. You have a bunch of guys all over the board there at Senior Bowl, but you watch talented guys that are say, these guys are going to fit somewhere on somebody's roster. You know, the fact that both Brown brothers are starting in the NFL. And I love Sidney Brown. I thought Chase Brown was good, but Sidney Brown was the dude. When I saw him at Senior Bowl, his film was amazing. He made me even more impressed, and he's been a very good player for Philadelphia. His brother's been a hell of a running back for Cincinnati. So I think what you're looking at with these guys, when they're getting out there and they're getting seen, you're watching them. If you take the chance to get the, you know, because everybody's during college football season, it's all about your team. When you get to the draft process, watch all those games. You're going to see some amazing young players. Even the Hula Bowl, even I forget they don't really televise the Tropical Bowl all over. So you got to kind of look that one up.
The Aloha Bowl?
The Shrine, East West Shrine is yeah. So you're going to see, if you're watching all these games, you're seeing a lot of talented players. These guys are all going to end up somewhere for the most part. There'll be some that don't, unfortunately. They probably end up in the XFL or just not playing football ever again. But there's a lot of talented players in those games, and it's great to watch them, get a feel for them one more time, because you know, if you were watching just your team, you didn't see some of these guys, but seeing these guys play, going, these are pretty good ball players. I wonder where they're going to end up, and then watching the draft and watch where these guys fall. You know, it's always an amazing thing because you get a feel for it. You kind of connect with players when you're starting to really see how they play, and it's not the guys that you're used to rooting for. You go, wow, there's some really good ball players. I didn't see this guy during the season. He's really good. And you start to get a chance to appreciate the talent that's out there.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, with that, we better
shut her down for tonight.
Thanks for all the viewers out there that watched the show. Sorry we didn't get you more involved in the NFL picks, but we figure that you wanted to get to bed before midnight. So
remember, Facebook, YouTube, X,
and Instagram now.
Instagram.
We're now on Instagram, so we're continuing to grow. Look us up on any of those pages, and we got a media guy here that works on it nonstop, and we're
he does.
If you get a chance to follow, we appreciate you if you follow us. But until we, everybody enjoy there's some great games this weekend, especially in the NFL. Look us up and have a great weekend. We'll see you again back here on Wednesday night at 8 for The Bottom Line. Good night, everybody.
Peace out, guys.
And that's the bottom line.